Hey, what's going on? What's going on? Welcome to another episode of Ask a Brother podcast. I'm your host, Jeff St. James. If you see that the format's a little different today, I'm trying to do a little bit of a vertical option. I think next future interviews, I might try the horizontal again, or maybe have a dual stream where both versions are coming out. Just kind of want to see how it kind of comes out once I kind of have this stuff up and for sure. But listen, y'all, shout out to everybody who's currently watching and is going to start to tune in. I'm super excited about tonight. I have a very, very, very big guest. And you all, if you clicked on this channel, you already know who he is. But before we get underway with who our guest is for this special evening, shout out to our subscribers. I just happened to check, and it looks like we have 35,793 subscribers that have joined this channel in 2025, and we haven't even reached the new year. So kudos to all y'all. 35,793 subscribers. So this has been an awesome dream for me. Starting and launching this thing back in January, I honestly, I was like, I definitely didn't anticipate something as easy as not as easy, something as lofty as 30,000 people supporting the brand and the channel. And it's been awesome for this to happen in year one. So I'm already excited about what I have planned and coming up even before the end of this year, let alone what 2026 has to bring. Shout out to the people who are in the chat. So if you are in the chat, please make sure that you like this. Make sure that you like it. Make sure you hype the video, that you like it. Feel free to become a subscriber if you have not done so. For everybody who's already supporting the channel, the number one way to support the channel is to do what? Become a member. If you click on the membership link, Mrs. Plum, appreciate you being in the building. Feel free to click on the link that Mrs. Plum has kind of posted to become a channel member. $2.99 is how you can become a member, and you can support the channel just by doing that. You don't have to worry about donations, super chats, or really doing anything else. Just by being a member, that's a very short and easy way for you to kind of support the channel and the brand for sure. If you guys haven't, make sure you check out at some point this week or whenever you get the chance, my most recent episode that I released last week titled How to Become a Master Communicator, where I go into really good detail in terms of speech courses, logic courses, and even, who to study and how to start practicing, how to become a much more effective and better communicator for sure. And tomorrow's episode that I'll be going live in, and I may decide if I wanted to allow it to be a call-in portion and even post the link for you guys to even potentially hop in and contribute to the conversation, is going to be single by choice is a lie. And I want to give my views and opinions on why I think the majority of people who tend to use that talking point, usually they're not really meaning exactly what it is that statement is. And it's usually something else that I think that they mean when they state that. Additional episodes that are going to be coming up as well this week. It'll be the truth about Black fatigue. That'll be on Thursday, going live as well. And then next week, I'm going to see if I can fit in the most unattractive people are ... And I got some big interviews lined up as well. So we're just trying to finalize some things before we start making announcements on some really, really, really big guests that's going to be coming up over the next week or two. So really excited about that. So again, if you're in the chat, please make sure that you like this video. Make sure that you hype it up. Make sure that you send it to 2 to 3 people. I'm telling you right now, every time I've told y'all, this is the type of interview, this is the type of podcast, this is the moment where I highly recommend for those who love knowledge, wisdom, higher level discussions. This is going to be one of those where I think it's going to be special. And I highly, highly, highly recommend that you all kind of send it to your folks, to your girlfriends, your guy friends, anyone and everyone that you think this will be in a very important discussion when it comes to masculinity, male studies, and a whole host of other things kind of related to that for sure. But before I get too off track, I do need to make sure that I play our ad for our, our sponsor for today. See if I can find our video. Yep, I got it. All right, so listen, y'all, I'm going to shout out to our sponsor for today with DuSable Botanical Farms for their healthy alternatives to assist you gentlemen in the bedroom with sexual performance and improving testosterone levels. You may want to upload it. Sorry. And I'm going to play our sponsor's video real quick, and then I'm going to read off our code for how you can get a discount with your next purchase. And then we're going to hit the ground running with tonight's interview. Stay tuned. So shout out again to our sponsor, DuSable Botanical Farm, City Botanical Farms, and make sure you guys use the code AskABrother10 for 10% off your next purchase. Thank you, Mrs. Plum, for getting that up for me, and it's in the chat. And all the links that I've been mentioning, she's been posting it like clockwork. So feel free, become a subscriber, become a member. Make sure you like this video, and I'm telling you guys that you are absolutely going to probably more often than not enjoy this type of conversation, because when I met with Dr. Tia San Johnson, when I've met with Tommy Sotomayor, when I've met with some of these really big names in their respective fields and industries, it's been an honor to kind of get these people to kind of come into this space. So I'm excited. I think that this is going to be pretty dope. So again, last but not least, before I introduce tonight's next guest, make sure that you like this if you haven't. Make sure that you send it to 2 or 3 people. Make sure you become a subscriber if you haven't. And then last but not least, if you are a man, you know, we are doing men's groups on Tuesdays. I actually just got out of it real soon, like about 20 minutes ago. And we're going to be actively planning our men's retreat next summer. So, you know, we're working through our Dr. Jordan Peterson book. We're working on coming up with our goals for 2026, and we're about to start planning our men's retreat. So we are making moves. So and get somebody's already starting it off right at Tunny 777. I appreciate you for the $5. Excited to learn from Tommy Curry. Still studying The Man Not. Amazing book that I'm sure towards the tail end and throughout the discussion we may reference, and I'm going to try to make sure to remind everybody to make sure that you can show support in that way. And again, Mrs. Plum, appreciate you for showing this is the school link for you guys to be able to join if you want to check out our men's group for sure. But without further ado, because you all aren't here when it comes to these interview nights for me, he is a prominent American philosopher and scholar who holds the personal chair in Africana philosophy and Black male studies at the University of Edinburgh. He's a researcher, an author, and an incredible speaker. We are blessed and lucky to catch this individual before the close of 2025. Please help me welcome to the stage and to the show, Dr. Tommy J. Curry. What's going on, sir?
Hey, sir. Good morning, Scotland.
So listen, y'all, this is an honor. This is an honor, sir. I'm so happy that you pulled up on me and made it in the building. Real quick, for everybody who maybe not super aware of you or this is their first time meeting you, can you kind of briefly tell folks a little bit about like your educational and career background and how you even got into studying men and masculinity?
No, I'm absolutely happy to do so. I'm from Lake Charles, Louisiana, first generation student. Coming from the South, I saw lots of poverty. It wasn't really until I got much older that I saw Black men who were in their 50s, 60s. So I grew up in a world where most Black men, when they get to that age, kind of just sat on the porch or died. So through education, you know, you go to undergrad, you study pretty much the same kind of theories that everyone else does. I'm sure you yourself, you know, took the general feminism courses, your core curriculums, etc. And I always felt something was missing, right? So I majored in philosophy, political science, Black studies. I'm hearing about Black struggle. I'm seeing the evidence of how politics and power operate. But the one conversation that seemed to always be absent from that was the way that Black men and boys, and kind of the history of racialized men and boys more generally, were always excluded from areas of concern. So we talk about the civil rights movement. We don't talk about it as a success for Black people. We talk about it as a defeat of a certain kind of Black nationalism, a certain kind of Black male militancy towards coalitions where people get along. And I was curious, both in my master's program and later in my PhD, that if you're reading the works of I did my dissertation on Derek Bell, the late Derek Bell, and he said, you know, he would write about the permanence of racism, talk about how Black people were oppressed. But he has these really interesting passages where he talks about how Black men were policed by the government, how Black men were isolated from affirmative action gains, demonized, arrested, etc. And it piqued my curiosity to start thinking about that a lot more. So around 2013, I finished my PhD in 2009. Around 2012, 2013, I started pushing the racism as permanent thesis a little further. I wanted to understand what was the relationship between Black men and boys and racial oppression. And instead of this being a welcomed conversation within the United States Academy, there's a lot of pushback and resentment. I remember one of the first talks I gave on the issue had to be around 2012. in a philosophy. And there was one article, just one article, that was published on black men who were victims of during slavery. So I
Oh,
started,
great, great, great. I
I read this article
mhm.
uh, and said, this is something I want to explore a little bit more. Gave a paper on it. Never forget, a black feminist booed me from the crowd, told me I was taking attention away from the real victims. And after that paper, I had a few young men come to me and say, you know, that happened to me. And I was interested by that, but I was a little bit afraid, to be honest with you, because I didn't have any knowledge or experience with black men who were actually victims. This was a historical paper.
Mhm.
So I started doing a little bit more research. I wanted to understand how black men were affected by rape. I could find nothing, right? I think I found an Essence article about black boys and sexual abuse. So
Mhm.
that kind of started me on my journey where I wanted to better understand this vulnerability that black men had. And it was through all that research from like 2013 to 2015 that I actually developed the Man Not and started thinking about what does it mean to talk about racism, but consistently miss the point that most of the harshest and most lethal elements of racism
Mhm.
are targeted towards males. So when we think about lynching and castration, mass incarceration, unemployment, segregation, and more importantly, the logic behind segregation, why white people want to keep a distance from black people, the logic of it's about men. White men historically, this holds for most empires and colonial societies, never had a problem raping the women of a supposedly inferior race. But the men of that race, castrated, enslaved, murdered, right, mutilated, this historical tendency interested me, it fascinated me. And that's what I decided I wanted to dedicate my intellectual career to. And it's led me to some really interesting paths with male victims. It's led me to some very interesting and not so congenial debates within the academy. But at the end of the day, it forged a path for a new field that's pushing back, I think, around the mischaracterizations and misrepresentations of Black men in the United States and racialized men around the world.
Mm. How do you define black male studies? Because I think for a lot of people, including myself when I was in college, never heard of it, didn't even knew it was a thing.
Yeah,
Why I'd heard
yeah.
of feminist studies, right? I had heard of women's lib and different courses relating to that. But how would you how would you describe and define black male studies from your lens?
No, thank you. So I think a lot of people confuse Black male studies with Black masculinity studies. Black masculinity studies is a very particular feminist inspired study of the various performances of masculinity that Black men or other groups of men may have. Right. So it's important to understand masculinity when people talk about it in most American academies are talking about gender performances that overlay or come to represent or extend from what people often think of as biological sex.
Okay.
Black male studies is not interested in gender performances. In fact, many Black male studies scholars reject the notion of gender as a concept that could apply to racialized men in the first place.
Mm.
So, Black male studies is interested in if you have a population of males, right? And here we're
Mhm.
talking about sex. So, if you have biologically sex males as a population, what happens when you impose racism, poverty, colonialism, etc., on that population?
Mm.
It's a demographic concern, not an identity concern.
Okay.
It asks what kind of violence, what kind of dehumanization is imposed on them, and then how do they respond and resist to this? So, for example, when you think about the lethal targeting of Black men, say through lynching and castration, you see these imposition of forces of hatred, of dehumanization. Black men are called beasts, animals, etc.
Mhm.
How have Black men responded to that? Have Black men said they just want to be white men? Right? The answer to that's absolutely not.
Mhm.
They've had different African societies. They've had different forms of resistance where they've integrated Black women into various clubs, where they've created different notions of manhood that would justify their resistance against Western imperialism or Western enslavement, etc. Black male studies is trying to capture that process. How
Mm,
black male populations have responded, resisted, created their own values, their own notions of manhood, and more importantly, their own diagnoses of systems that still kill, negate, and disempower black men today.
mhm. You had mentioned earlier that when you had spoke on men or males being raped or
Yeah,
experiencing
yes.
experiencing that, how a black female feminist kind of booed you in the crowd.
Yeah.
What with you introducing these topics in the field that's typically only wanting to focus on the feminine and
Mhm.
women's perspectives and lenses and feminism, for instance, how has that played into like your professional relationships and just navigating the space? Like what's it been like for you in terms of like attacking this topic when most people
Mhm.
don't even want to hear about it?
Well, I mean, it's really interesting, right? On one hand, and it really requires some nuance, right? So if you're in the United States, there's a very visceral hostility towards black men, right? So if you're in the United States and you, for instance, point out that Bell Hooks doesn't use citations, or that Bell Hooks is making up certain accounts of black men's violence in their communities,
Hmm.
there's a harsh defensiveness. It's not a very scholarly argument. It's predominantly ideological. Like I'll give you a great example of this.
Okay.
In one of Bell Hooks' texts, she argues that after slavery ended, so after emancipation, black men used to take black women into barns and beat them. Okay. Now I could find no source for this. I couldn't.
Hmm.
I've looked through pretty much practically every 19th century account of this. There was only one person that said something similar, and that was Samuel Cartwright. He was a pro-slavery ethnologist. He argued that African people like the Dahomey were fundamentally misogynistic, that they would pave their roads with the skulls of dead African women, and slavery saved African women from the savagery of black men. The black men who were in the United States that had endured slavery, he thinks that they were civilized. So he doesn't think that they're killed them and paved the roads with black women's skulls, but he thinks that they will still beat black women. So he said slavery lessened the protection of the black female. Now,
Hmm.
what's interesting is that that's the only thing that gets even close to what Bell Hooks was saying. But as a historical point, black men didn't have the right, it's called chastisement. Black men didn't have the ability or the recognized right that white men had, which was to say spank or discipline their wives, as long as they didn't leave any bruise or proof of injury. They passed laws in the South that prevented black men or denied black men this right. So what Bell Hooks tries to say is that black men were chastising black women, but there were laws in place throughout the South and even some on the East Coast that prevented that from happening. So much so that if a black man was accused of it, he would not only lose the right to the ballot, but he could be lynched. So there are actual cases in Ida B. Wells' Blood Red Record
Hmm.
where you can see that black men were lynched because of chastisement laws. This is controversial. It's a historical fact. It's a
Hmm.
historiographic intervention. What we call we're given a different account of historical evidence, right?
Yeah.
But this controversial because the ideology of America says black men shall not question, black men shall not criticize, much less reject the kind of ideological holding claims that black feminism or even white liberal feminism makes about their history. Now, if
Mm.
you go outside the United States, you get a little bit more openness. So, one of the reasons that I came to Europe was because it was a much more open and intellectually curious society.
Hmm.
So there are people in Europe, of course, that still disagree with Black male studies or any focus on men.
Hmm.
But because of the empiricism that's kind of in the culture of Europe, especially in the United Kingdom, they're willing to at least see the evidence. They're asked, well, what evidence do you have for the claim? That provides a bit of an intervention, a bit of a space for Black men to discuss the erroneous history that's been given to us by people like Bell Hooks, Kimberly Crenshaw, etc., around the
Hmm.
civil rights movement, around notions of Black male privilege, etc. But it's still a battle, to be quite honest with you, because
Yeah.
this is not a political contest. I mean, one of the reasons that I called it Black male studies was because I'm interested in studying populations. And it's not an ism, so to speak. And there's certainly Black male studies scholars who are masculinists, right? Which is a completely legitimate interpretation and account of how they read the Black male experience. But Black male studies scholars that usually are coming from Edinburgh there and you know, when I was at Texas A&M, we're close to sociologists. We're interested in how societies are created and how stereotypes or caricatures of black men and racialized men are used to justify lethal extermination, disposability, and
Mhm.
racial oppression writ large. Uh, so what we're doing is we're trying to create and change, right, simultaneously, the perception of black men. See, it's not enough for us to say that black men are burdened by negative stereotypes. We have to show the logic and the function of those stereotypes. So
Mhm.
why do we want to say that black men are criminal? Because we want to justify penal institutions, mass incarceration systems, and various forms of lethal state violence and white vigilantism that discipline black men. Why do we say that black men are predatory? Because we want to claim that in killing black men, it's fundamentally a good. It protects the order of society, it protects women. These kinds of tropes are things that have been in existence throughout the West, not only in the United States, but also in Europe, Canada, etc.,
Mhm.
for centuries. And Black male
Well,
studies scholars are trying to challenge that, trying to undo that.
now I appreciate that, and I know that a lot of what you're talking about has kind of been a deep seated thing that we a lot of us have been socialized to do. So on one end, for foundational Black Americans, we're desensitized to the things that we see and hear on the news if we live in some of these or work in these particular cities where we're constantly hearing about somebody got shot. Like it's kind of just it's a given. If you work in
Yeah,
and I work in Philly, it's like, oh, they said, oh, up the street somebody got shot at the gas station. I'm like, oh, that sucks. Like, but that's kind of it. And it's because we've been desensitized when it comes to how
absolutely.
we even view the value of black life, let alone black male life. And then on the flip side, what you mentioned that I loved was that the people, in order for people to adequately be able to be okay with the treatment of what's happening to men or black men or anything in other groups or communities, like you said, there has to be something in their psyche to explain the
Yes,
dehumanization,
yes.
right?
And I
Yeah.
think that's something, I honestly think that that's something that often is missing in our accounts of men and boys. It's
Mm,
one thing to say that men are not doing well on various metrics, right? So I think we see from the ongoing conversations with Reeves and with Gallo, for instance, this kind of new, I don't want to say necessarily new because there's elements of it from the 1980s, but we see a progressive account of how men are being left out of certain sectors of society, be it employment, education, mental health, and
mhm,
courtship, right? I don't think that's bad, but it doesn't have explanatory power to
mhm,
talk about the history of black males. So
mhm.
if you say, for instance, as Gallo does, that there's this disconnect in the empathy for men's problems,
Yeah.
okay?
And for the audience that's not aware, he's referencing Scott Galloway.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. You could say.
So yeah, so if you're thinking about Galloway's claim in his recent book, that's a descriptive claim that largely applies to white men. And you
Mhm.
would say, well, black men don't receive empathy as well. And I'll say you're absolutely right. But there's a certain level of disgust and um, dehumanization, animus directed towards black men in a different way.
Mm,
So you can disconnect from a white male and say, well, we don't understand the male problem. We don't understand depression. We don't understand false paternity, etc. But the very nature of the white man has historically been constructed as rational, reasonable, civil, just. The debates that you're having now is about a politics that holds that men generally are toxic. So toxic
mhm,
masculinity is being imposed on groups of white men such that they are claimed to be criminal, etc. And the pushback is, hey, if you look at who we are, if you look at what we've done, that's not who we are, right?
mhm,
It's a
mhm,
very simple political issue versus what white men really are. When you look at black men, we don't have that luxury. There's no character that's historically been constructed of us where we're rational and civil and paternalistic and protectors.
mhm,
Because
mhm,
the notion of black savagery, the notions of black men being bestial, were justifications for our enslavement, our confinement within segregation, and today our incarceration and murder. So
mhm,
there's no character to peel back to refute the notions of toxic masculinity. As I
Mm-hmm.
say in the Man Not, the standard of toxic masculinity is really about white male pathological excess. So the white male has a normal character. He's allowed to be rational, even when he's angry or commits crimes. He doesn't represent the whole group because it's not a manifestation of his nature. But when a
Yeah.
black man or black boy commits any crime or becomes deviant, that's not a mistake or an error in judgment. It's a fundamental expression of his primordial and savage nature that
Mm-hmm.
has to be controlled by society if the society wishes to function squarely. And this
And it's, I'm assuming when you say that, it's not just that they're saying this is who he is, this is who they are. This is how
this is
they
who they
see,
are
yeah,
exactly.
the population.
Every black male is this, right?
Mm,
It eliminates the individuality of it. The deviance is a group phenomenon. And this is what I meant earlier when I said black male studies scholars are interested in populations.
wow.
Deviance, criminality, misogyny, domestic violence, right?
Mm, mm,
These are aspects, inclinations, personalities of the black man as a group. Whereas white men who are toxic, who are violent, those are individuals where
yeah,
something went wrong. So the
yeah.
issue that right, remember Galloway's argument isn't that the issue is a fundamental reconstitution of what it means to be a white man. It's about the empathy for the problems that are given the illusion, the appearance of toxicity.
Yeah.
That's not the case for black men,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
We're not saying that there's an illusion, right? The world doesn't say there's an illusion of black men. It says that is what black men are. That's the
mhm,
black male. He's
mhm,
violent, he's criminal, etc. And this distinction is really important because it separates black male studies both as an intellectual enterprise and as a talking point, right? Because I see now that it's been picked up on Twitter and it gets dispersed in different ways. This differentiates black male studies from what we're generally talking about when we talk about masculinity or this newfound progressive movement to create empathy and social structure and recognition of men's problems.
mhm,
The claim that we're making is that because you're not dealing with racism, the history of slavery, the exclusion of black men from various sectors of society, a general account of empathy is not going to work. White Americans, as we can see in this last election, do not empathize with black people generally.
mhm,
So to say that we're creating empathy for a group when
mhm,
we're missing how black people have a humanity, we're missing how black people have been excluded, demonized, condemned,
mhm.
that doesn't change just because you've appealed to the sensibilities of men's problems.
I appreciate so much of what you just covered, and there's a piece that you kind of hinted at when it came to when Galloway, you, Dr. Tia San Johnson, and many others have tried to bring these issues up, whether it's men in general or even foundational Black Americans, males' unique issues.
Mhm.
I spoke to a couple podcasters behind the scenes and even spoke to some women who are very staunch with the talking points when it comes to the feminist ideology, even if they claim they're not feminists. And I asked them straight out, do you struggle with seeing men or seeing Black men as victims? And
Yeah.
that was for a lot of them, that was actually the first time they've ever even realized the
Hmm.
reason why they always side with the woman, and when men's issues are brought up, they always see it as a scapegoat to kind of get away from the real victims, is because in their
Yeah.
mind, children and women are the only ones that could be victims. And even then, I don't even know how much they really view boys as being victims unless it's their
Yes.
own son.
Yes.
So from your lens, when you've gotten that pushback and you're sensing that vitriol and that energy coming your way, and
Hmm.
you're sensing like they have a very dehumanized view of Black males and Black boys, how have you engaged with that or responded to it?
Well, I think the first thing we have to understand is that that's not necessarily a rational conclusion.
Hmm.
It's effective. And what I mean by that is that it's a precondition that is given to individuals and groups of individuals through social programming and social conditioning, right?
Hmm.
Some of our colleagues that work in psychoanalysis talk about this as kind of a form of ideological indoctrination that manifests itself as desires to see certain groups like Black men punished, to see certain groups like Black men condemned and socially ostracized, etc.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I think two things. One is not necessarily something that can be overcome purely with education. We have beat the education bandwagon forever,
Yeah.
where we've said we just have to educate people about their biases, their stereotypes, etc. There is a function, there is a use that the society has for disallowing Black males from being seen as victims. The function of that is it enables programs of mass violence to occur without moral condemnation.
Mm,
So while we may have fanfares, we may protest, we may march when Black men are shot, we have instituted no specific programs that eliminate the unbiased or unprejudiced or the
mhm,
gratuitous violence directed at Black men and boys, right? So I think
mhm.
we have to understand that piece first.
Yeah.
The second thing, in terms of how I deal with it, well, I directly confront it. I advocate for the humanity of Black men and boys the same way that we would any other group.
Yeah.
And what I challenge these people who spew this kind of hateful rhetoric, right? And I know exactly what you're talking about because the work I do with Black men, not just of who are victims of police homicides and negative police encounters, but with made to penetrate violence, child abuse, physical, etc. There is a way in which, because he is a male, they try to lessen the violence. Well, a Black man can't. I've been told from philosophers, like Black female philosophers,
Mhm.
and academics, well, Black men can't. Or if a Black man is by a woman, he enjoyed it. Or if a Black man was by a woman, it didn't injure him like if a woman would. And when we look at the data, this is not the case, right? So we know that early childhood sexual experiences, for instance, lead to riskier sexual behaviors,
Mhm.
right? Sometimes uh, fascinations or addictions that manifest in promiscuity or obsession.
Mhm.
We know depression, conflict, intimate partner conflicts, violence occurs if you have early sexual childhood experience, especially by coercion.
Facts.
So it's not empirically true that Black
Mhm.
men don't respond to this abuse. But
Mhm.
what is the catch-all? What is the need that these individuals have to dismiss Black men as victims? And what I found in these conversations is it's either to sustain their political ideology, right? That Black men are perpetrators of violence against women, hence they can't be hurt by women, right? And we see this a lot in
Mhm.
intersectional feminist discourses and white liberal feminist discourses. Or, and this is something that's really important, is to rationalize the violence that they have towards these groups of people.
Mm.
So there will be numerous women who, in discussing these issues, talk about their relationships or their past relationships with boyfriends, brothers, men in their lives, where they've enacted violence, be it psychological, verbal, or physical. And in order for them to dispel the guilt that they have somehow harmed this group of men, they externalize it such that
Mhm.
these men couldn't be victims. They did something to deserve that violence.
Mhm. Mhm.
So this again, this disallowing of vulnerability, or that's what we call in Black male studies, of Black male vulnerability, is really predicated on violence and disregard. Because we wouldn't think that if we talk to a young woman and every day she's told she's lesser than,
Yeah.
every day she's told that she's not as good as a man, every day she sees that the people who occupy the positions in education or job or government never look like her. We don't say that that's not traumatic, that that doesn't do something to her will, aspiration, emotions, or even the way that she relates with others. But we
Mm.
will live in a society where people will tell Black men that even though they got killed, like Tamar Rice got shot, a 12-year-old boy was shot by police
And
playing with a
Ohio,
toy
right?
gun,
Or Cleveland or
right?
Ohio. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We will say that seeing dead Black men on the ground in blood when police shoot them, and people share videos of them. We will see internet posts on Twitter or Facebook where Black men are said that they're trash, or they don't die right, or they're bullet bags, and we
Mhm.
don't take a moment to consider, well, what do those messages do to the Black male? You see, and this
Mhm.
is the difference in separation about vulnerability and victimization. The
Yeah.
white woman becomes a victim because the society does not applaud, support, and aspire to see her being a fully developed human being. The Black man does not only go through that. right? Where the society doesn't aspire for him to be anything, doesn't make room for him. He's actively eliminated within the society. He's actively criminalized by the society. And even given those that extent of violence, seeing black men hanging from trees as recently as Mr. Reed, Trey Reed, I believe in Mississippi,
Hmm.
are seeing black men killed and laid dead in the street like Mike Brown. We don't see that as fundamentally negating the psychological health and existential value that black men have in this world. So
Wow.
then when we ask that question again, what happens when people deny black male victimization? I confront them with the reality that I've described, that it's a way for them to rationalize, right? It's a way for them to excuse, explain away the concrete violence and murder that they see every day for black men and boys.
Hmm.
Because there's no other group of people, especially in the white liberal academy, that is allowed to be erased, dissembled, right, into different caricatures and threats, and
Hmm.
absolutely disregarded in that way.
Wow. Wow. Listen, y'all. For starters, if you are in the chat, I see about 219 of y'all are currently watching. I do not see 219 likes. So please make sure that you guys like this if you haven't liked this for sure. This particular video that we have up right now, this live. If make sure that you become a subscriber, make sure you send it to 2 or 3 people. And please, please, please make sure that you hype it up and feel free to hit that $sign because I will be reading all of those questions and comments if you're doing the super chats. So I greatly appreciate you all for your support. So back to our convo. I appreciate this because me being newer in this space in terms of podcasting and getting this content and stuff out there, the amount of pushback, the amount of
Oh yeah, man.
one-on-ones, it's been surreal, but none of it's new. None of it's
Yeah.
new, not because I saw it on the professional realm in regards to the low view of acknowledging um men's unique issues and challenges in general, let alone
Yeah.
as a black man. So that wasn't a hard leap for me. I didn't realize how much more additional misandry will come with me looking like me, bringing attention to this versus me looking like Scott Galloway. Scott
Yes.
Galloway is being invited onto The View and all these major platforms to bring attention to this stuff. And there's women that look like me that would attack me just because I'm literally making very similar, the same exact
Mhm.
talking points. Where for a lot of, I'll take foundational black women, Scott Galloway's may not even be on their radar. They might not even know
Yeah.
who he
Yeah.
is. But if they see a black individual getting up and saying, stating a lot of the exact same concerns, and in the end, what you're talking to, everybody in the audience has seen it or experienced it, where
Mhm.
when we try to bring up anything, any issue, anything whatsoever, whether it's uh mandatory paternity testing, fraud in regards to that, maybe trying to put a curtail and punish people who are what are they called, doing false allegations on someone.
Mhm.
I've said it before, it doesn't, if the more captured their mind and their thought processes it is to like the ultra far left feminist approach, and the more anti-male and anti-masculinity they are, the less that they're interested in any options of actually fixing those issues. And
Absolutely.
you kind of alluded to it. They'll say
Mhm.
something like, they'll turn it back on men anyway. So a woman could
Mhm.
commit the offense, a woman could commit the crime, a woman can go to court and do the thing, take advantage of the system, destroy this man's name, whatever it is, and they'll say, "Well, that sounds like he's a victim of the patriarchy, huh?" So in their worldview, women don't really actually do anything wrong towards men. Their
Yeah.
view is
Yeah.
only one group's allowed to be a victim, and the
Mhm.
other group by default has to be seen as an oppressor.
Yeah, and I think this is the problem with, the general acceptance of patriarchy.
Mm,
In our research, we've actively attacked this notion that patriarchy is uh, a class of all men oppressing all women,
yeah.
and that is a very recent. It's funny because
Mhm.
that is such a recent definition of patriarchy that it's almost laughable,
Yeah.
right? So you have to understand this.
Mhm.
Most of the terms that we utilize in the 21st century were really solidified in the 20th century. And especially in America, we have very, very short historical memories. Just think about it logically for one moment. If Black people were enslaved, right, and that ended in 1865, okay, the presumption was not that, oh, these are a bunch of men that should be free to participate equally in the society like white men and white women.
Mm-hmm.
So if patriarchy existed in the 19th century, it's still going to disallow Black men from taking advantage of the kinds of privileges like chastisement, right? Ability to discipline and spank your wife that white men have. Now, in that system, who had more power? Black men who were freely enslaved, right? Recently freed from slavery, or
Mm-hmm.
white women, right? Clearly, the answer is white women.
White women. Yeah.
Right now, here's what the liberal feminist is going to say because I talk to these people all the time. Well, Black men got the right to vote. Absolutely. They fought, died, were betrayed, murdered, and then disenfranchised. But you're right, on paper, they got the right to vote.
Yeah.
But then they were lynched. And then guess what happened? Suffragettes came up and said, hey, we deserve the right to vote too. So we are more rational, more civilized, more patriarchal, and manlike than these Black men. And you
Mm.
see this in their language, right? Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Charlotte Gilman, Phoebe Cousins,
Mm.
talking about how Black men are brutal, talking about how Black men are misogynistic and they don't deserve the right to vote. Rebecca Latimer Felton, you gave the Black man the ballot. You made let him believe that he was a man, but he is a rapist. So if we have to lynch 1,000 Negroes a week to protect white women, so be it. White women did not respond as recognizing Black men as men. They recognized them as beasts. In fact, when you get to the 20th century, you have tons of sociologists, white sociologists and social scientists, right,
Mm.
saying the Black race is a race without men at all. See, so this notion that patriarchy
Hold on,
is,
hold on, because we not gonna skip over what you just said.
yeah,
Please
yeah.
quote that again. And who referenced that or who stated that?
Oh God. Well, I mean, it was a common fact. So you
Okay.
have that in Henry Odom's work, right? He's a guy that's writing actually about domestic abuse and crime,
Mm-hmm.
and he says that one piece of the evidence, right, that the Black race is not an evolved race, is it doesn't have real men, right? So apatriarchality, or that's what we call it in our research, the idea that Black men could not rule households, that they were street men, that they couldn't form nuclear families, or the idea that Black men couldn't hold a job, support their family, they would have multiple women and leave, that they were not monogamous. These were all tropes during early social scientific studies that kind of justified to white researchers and thinkers that Black men weren't real men. You see,
Mm.
people, this is what I mean about the short historical memory. People don't understand that if you're looking at a white patriarchal society and the white family, the father, the mother, and the children were
Mm-hmm.
the basis of the family and the government and the society more generally, Black men and Black families were not thought to be normal within those societies. They were thought to be pathological and deviant. And one of the major deviants or deviations from white patriarchal families was that Black men were not in the home. This
Mm-hmm.
is why they claimed that Black families were matriarchal. That was the dominant view from like 1920 to 1980 in the United States. These were matriarchal households. So
Mm.
you can go through, I mean, you listen, you can Google search. This is how easy it is to find it. You
Mm-hmm.
can literally Google search this on Google Scholar, and you will find all kind of articles where it talks about how Black men were influenced by mother sex roles, how Black men were never in the homes, how Black men were not real men. This is commonly understood within early 1900s. But what's important about that is it shows the fracture. Because when you get to the 1950s and 60s, which is when white women start talking about themselves as an oppressed minority, this is Hillard Hacker's work, Women as a Minority Group in
Mm.
57. This is de Beauvoir, et cetera. This is kind of the feminist package of how gender is constructed and white women became oppressed. You know what they say? You know what Helen Hacker says?
What?
She says white women generally don't have the view that they're an oppressed minority. The reason we know that they're oppressed by white men is because of how white masculinity treats the Negro. So she says that it's by how Black people are treated in the United States that we understand what comes to be called patriarchy operates.
Mm.
It's a racial term because at this period of time, like Alva Murdahl says, White women are being engaged paternalistically. They're being cared for and choices are being taken away from them. They're being kept in the home. They're being prevented from buying property and going into this, walking down the street alone, etc. Their
Hmm.
choices are being limited. They're not being lynched and hung from trees.
Yeah.
So when the white feminist then comes back in a politicized movement in the 60s and 70s, notice what she's doing. She's co-opting the language of racial oppression as the analogy, saying how white men have treated white women, which is not true because she's looking, of course, at black people, and then codifying that as the dominant oppression in the United States. And we actually know this is the case. Like when we, in some of the articles I write about, I talk about Martha Griffith, who was one of the senators in Title VII, where they were trying to push race and she added sex,
Hmm.
saying that we need to focus on the oppression of women rather than the oppression of black people, so that white women have the right to sue under Title VII jurisprudence or legislation. This meant that all the resources from the 1970s, titles or the 1960s actions around Title VII would ultimately benefit white women in terms of education and employment more than would black people. And there were
Hmm.
amicus briefs where this was, look, this isn't even a secret. Like you can look up the congressional record.
Yeah. Yeah.
The reason for this is because white women did not want black women or black people to have rights and resources that they didn't have.
Hmm.
So the notion of patriarchy that's being pushed by white feminism presupposes a condition where people have power to rule over white women. White women owned black men. They
Yeah.
owned black boys. They owned black women.
They
They
were a
owned
huge
black
percentage of
people.
the slave owners too. Yeah.
Exactly, right?
Mhm.
Stephanie Jones Rogers' work. See, so if that's true, how do you have this class, right, of groups of men that are all oppressing women? It does not exist. And
Yeah.
the craziest part about this, brother, is that it's not even, this isn't like a theoretical argument. They said it doesn't exist. Right? If
Mhm.
you read the white feminists of like the 1970s, they say black men have gained more power, but they're not really patriarchs, they're not real men. They kept that racial stereotype. So
Yeah.
what they did is they separated the races. They said, hey, in the white race, masculinity, aggression, right? This is
Hmm.
what our men are like. But in the black race, right, the men are weak. Their women run their households. This was
Yeah.
actually their
Yeah.
justification for explaining why, like in places like Philadelphia, black women kill black men more. Because they would say
Yeah.
because black men are not real men, these women exert more power, and that's why the ratios of male to female homicide are different within the home. There's a long, long history of this throughout the 20th century. So
Mm.
when people say patriarchy, that men are oppressed by patriarchy, they're correct, but that patriarchy only exists insofar as white people are oppressing subordinate groups of men.
Mm.
Patriarchy operates to keep kinships together. So think of it. Is there any patriarchal society that commits mass genocide against women? Of
No.
course not.
No.
No, not in any Western society. We
Hmm.
can't point to one. Why? Because you need women to reproduce your superior race.
Facts.
Are
Facts.
women going to be called beasts? Are they going to be called vermin so they could be exterminated? Absolutely not. Why? Because if you have a superior race, the women that give birth to that race can't be considered to be animals, vermin, and lower on the evolutionary scale than other groups of men in other races. So
What
that
I
means that the history of white supremacy has
Mhm.
protected white women, our European women, from the kind of dehumanization that we see among racial groups when they're thought to be beasts, animals, devils, vermin, etc.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
feminist analysis of patriarchy is designed within a very specific system to maintain a division between white men and women, such that white men accrue and could justify violence against outgroups, and women can reproduce and be coerced into following along with that agenda. When you look at racial groups, they're all disposable. You can kill black men and reproduce with black women, and then that's considered progression in social mobility. If you're
Mm.
looking at somebody like Merton, his arguments about symbolism, like for interracial marriage.
Mhm.
So, what feminists are doing is they're obscuring the very history that they took ownership of.
Mhm.
They basically took the position of black men in terms of how white men were treating other groups of people. And
Mm.
they said that is our experience of white masculinity. Where in reality, white women were just unhappy with the piece of the pie they stole. And that's
Mm.
very, very important to understand when we're
Mm.
trying to have a conversation about racialized men, black men in America, and the ways that white men and women have complete control of the political and economic systems that
Mhm.
predetermine, right, family court, employment, dating attribution, right? You remember a few years ago, there's this idea that educated black women didn't have, assortive mating was what it was called, right? Black
Mhm.
women didn't have enough options for educated black men, so they were forced to date down, right?
Yep,
This
yep.
nonsensical claim,
Mhm.
right? As if, these are things that are formulated not based on individual black men's wishes, but on what societies open up in the education market, the employment
Mhm.
sector, etc. So you have a group of people that are constraining the society, right? Creating scarcity among racial populations where black men don't fare as well because of discrimination and incarceration. And then you come out on the other side of it and saying, well, these group of men don't have the resources, they don't have the will, they don't have the power that
Yeah,
white men command. So
yeah,
despite all the patriarchy, white women keep marrying white men and producing white babies.
yeah.
They keep perpetuating and reproducing white wealth. They keep investing in the same systems that keep black men and Latino men and Muslim men out of the country, right? We see this under Trump especially. But then you say that all that's a patriarchy, okay? But then
Mhm.
why doesn't it include black men? You see, the white
Mhm.
patriarchy exterminates black men so that it
Mhm.
can't rise into the same kinship systems that the dominant white race has. So
What's which
that's a long way of saying that's not an accurate analysis.
Yeah, and that it's a not an accurate analysis, but it's an extremely effective an effective
Oh, absolutely.
approach, right? Because they've had the amazing ability to be in a more privileged position than they're talking to all the other groups that they wanted to ban with to, to get
Hmm.
all, the white original suffragettes that wanted to get all these other groups to kind of coalesce and be a part of their movement. They were above all these other groups and
Absolutely.
they convinced the black women that their men were so patriarchal and that they're oppressors on one hand. So basically they could tell they could convince the black women that the black men are useless. They're not leaders. They're not making
Hmm.
money. They're not providers. They're not any of these things. They're not even real men. And simultaneously, they get the blame for all the patriarchy.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
so you get the blame for the patriarchy, but none of the positive consequences that supposedly
Hmm.
comes with being in a patriarchal position. I'm like, you're in this catch 22 where you're constantly being blamed for something that you're not even a product. You're not a product of. You're not even a active contributor to in any
Hmm.
grand scale. But you're still being blamed. Basically, all men in the culture and society, like you said, in terms of all men are oppressing all women according to the current definition of the
Hmm.
patriarchal model. When the men that are least getting that are already called not men, not leaders, shouldn't even be respected and questioned, and
Hmm.
simultaneously, they're being blamed for this all encompassing thing, and I'm like, this is
And
incredible because that's
that is
why.
the
So
contradiction we point out.
yeah, so that's why every time anybody brings up anything pertaining to men, but especially black men, there's this visceral reaction because now they're seeing it on two fronts. They're like, you're failing as leaders and men, and
Hmm.
you are the consequence for all that's wrong in society. And they see the crazy thing is they see all other men and especially black men as somehow walking hand in hand with the white patriarchal model. And I'm like, huh? Like, so I'm like, so you see, yeah, you see us as that. This is crazy.
But see that right there, that is the contradiction that ignited black male studies. See,
Mm,
because we asked a very historical empirical question. How do white patriarchal capitalistic societies treat racialized men?
mm,
And we found that they exterminate them. Now, this was, of course, said before me. I'm not the person. This wasn't like
mhm,
right?
mhm,
Like people like Earl Miller, the late Jim Sedanius, Anthony Mello, they all said this, but it wasn't organized as a conceptual principle that you could use to read and study history, politics, etc. Right?
mhm.
So just like you said, well, how if patriarchies are about all men oppressing all women, then why is it that you have groups of men who are exterminated, not called men, being ruled over by white men and white women?
And black
How
women.
right? Yeah, and
You
in
think?
some cases, black women, educated elite black women, right?
Yeah.
So and that's an important point, right? Because what black males, I think what makes people so uncomfortable with this conversation is that black
Hmm.
male studies scholars are not holding, we're not pulling punches. We're saying that there are going to be elite black men, there'll be conservative black men, there'll be black women, there'll be educated black women that can harm black men individually and as a group. So
Mm.
when we talk about the at large, what we call misandric, when we talk about misandric aggression or anti-black misandry,
Yeah.
we are not talking about individual animus. We're saying, listen, there is a system that accumulates negativity around black men and boys, right?
Hmm.
And let's say you think black men are violent, criminals, rapists, etc. And people in the society are socialized with that idea. Not just white people, but some
Hmm.
black people too, men and women.
Hmm.
And then in certain circles, these educated black men, these educated black women will utilize those stereotypes to separate themselves from poor working class black men who they think are the troublemakers, who they think bring down the race, who they think don't deserve the same status of humanity that they have.
Hmm.
And when we start looking at those divisions, how, and you can see this every day, right? You saw this in the recent election,
Yep.
right? When the educated middle class Democrats wanted to talk down to working class poor black men as if
Yep.
they were driven primarily by their penises and couldn't make rational decisions, and how
Hmm.
they had ads about strippers and dating shows where black men would be denied sexual access to women if they didn't vote for Kamala, right?
Hmm.
This is not appealing to groups of people you think are rational. These are appealing to people who you think are primitive, who
Hmm.
only understand politics as an extension of their sexual interests, not their economic, not their political, hell, not even their psychological. So what we've done is we've created classes of black people in the United States that can enact various stereotypes against groups of black men. I mean, we saw this actually in the, one of the things that, I don't want to curse, but one of the things that really upset me
Hmm.
was the explanation that Toure had for why there was a lower percentage of black men on HBCU campuses. And he, there was one part where he said, well, the researchers say that black men don't have the motivation. And I was offended because I know that research,
Hmm.
and that's not what it says.
Hmm.
What you have are black men who can go in, and William A. Smith does a lot of this research. He's a distinguished professor at University of Utah. What you have are black men who go into white educational spaces, right? Classrooms,
Yeah.
university, college campuses, and they're assaulted psychologically, they're assaulted in terms of their existential being. Stereotypes are imposed on them,
Hmm.
negations of them, suggesting that they're not as smart as their white counterparts or their female counterparts, right? Because we find this trend also operates in primary schools. The idea that black boys are not as intellectually and academically talented as their female counterparts is a very common finding among educational scholars.
Yeah.
So then when you get into that condition, that situation, you fight through that. Let's say you get your bachelor's degree. Well, then you get out. Now you're competing on the job market. And what do you find? Extremely harsh employment discrimination. They
Hmm.
prefer white men, white women, and black women over you in most jobs. Why? Because black women are perceived to have softer skills, not be a physical or sexual threat to white women, and not to be as confrontational as black men or as violent.
Hmm.
So they lose out on the educational benefits that they allegedly get through their bachelor's degrees, which should indicate social mobility. And then what do we find? Well, let's say you do get the job, right? We
Hmm.
find that because of societal racism, this is called diminishing returns, that many of the black men who are operating, in middle class or kind of pseudo middle class employment sectors don't get the psychological and health benefits. They still have high blood pressure. They still suffer from depression. They still suffer from negative self stereotypes and imaging of themselves in relationship to their white and female counterparts.
Yeah.
So when you ask, you see, this is what upsets me about what Toure says. When you ask about the specifics of why black men are not attending college or finishing college,
Hmm.
you leave out that the research has documented very well the
Hmm.
differences and experiences that black men have compared both to whites and other racial ethnic minority groups and their female counterparts.
Hmm.
You see, if you take away the male target, if you don't see how racism affects the male target, you think, oh, well, it's just racism and it affects black men and black women equally. That's not what the data says.
Correct.
The data says that there are fundamentally different qualities because black men are thought to be dangerous threats that have to be confined. This is why you see more incidences of police encounters on campuses involving black males.
Yeah.
So if you take that in consideration, why then may black males not be motivated to
Hmm.
finish college? Why would
Hmm.
black males choose to go into blue collar jobs like mechanics or a vocational field that earns them money more immediately, given that they made a rational economic decision that
Yeah.
the determining effects of discrimination at the end of their degree in the job market may
Hmm.
not outweigh what they could earn by entering the job market immediately. You see,
What's and I meant to say, because I don't want to lose this thought. What's
no,
so
absolutely.
powerful, and why it's so clear what you're saying is actually true in terms of how this stuff is being described. Every single demographic, me and Obsidian was talking about this. Every single major demographic, the women are outpacing the men in terms of
Mhm.
education.
Yeah.
But it's only in the black community that this is even used as a reference point to talk about how the
Mhm.
men are so far behind and there's no quality options. Like all the other group, the Asians is doing quite well. They're building wealth together. They're getting married together, and the women are outpacing. And well, it depends on the study and which year. But a lot of times, even the women sometimes are outpacing the men in the white community, in the Hispanic community, the Asian community. But it's the black community that this narrative keeps getting pushed, and it's like I would love for the most educated, or at least how they claim to be the most educated group in the country. I would love for them to apply that level of education and scrutiny and critical thinking to envisioning, like, why is it that everything that you're being told about what's wrong, 90% of that is coming from outside of the community in
Mhm.
terms of how to view it, how to analyze it, how to interpret the information, and what to make of your male counterparts. Everything is about what white liberal women telling you.
Well,
That's how it's coming off.
well, no, listen, brother. The lens that we use to study ourselves within American universities have been all determined by white theorists.
Mm,
And there will be colleagues and counterparts that disagree with that statement. But here would be my justification for it. The theories that we use, even Black feminists use, and many Black scholars use to talk about Black people, come from either white psychoanalytic theorists, Lacan, Freud, right?
mhm.
People don't really read Adler in the US, but those
You
kinds of
should,
people,
but that's another discussion.
right, right, you're right.
Mhm,
Or they come from feminist theory. And what they do is they say, well, if Kimberly Crenshaw said it, or Bell Hooks said it, or Patricia Hill Collins said it, that's Black theory. And that's not true. Because when you read the footnotes that they're citing, like
mhm,
Kimberly Crenshaw gets her analysis of domestic violence from Susan Schechter. This was a white feminist during the shelter movement that was actually hanging out with Black women that were starting in domestic violence centers in DC and
mhm,
listening to their speeches. So
mhm,
she developed her own kind of interpretation of patriarchal and compensatory masculinity that
mhm,
she says, this is why Black men commit violence because they're denied resources in the white world, like jobs, economics, etc., education, right, social mobility, and instead of them, creating resistance, they appeal to violence, and
mhm,
that's a major kind of focal point in Black and white feminism that converges in the 70s and 80s, that
mhm,
whereas Black men are admitted to not be patriarchs, right?
mhm,
And they have a manhood or masculinity that's being denied to them, that they use violence to compensate for that.
mhm,
So when you get that lens, right, this is the dominant view. The one thing that white people are very good at in the United States is controlling the ideological messaging that other groups of people have to utilize to understand themselves, right?
Ooh,
So when you want
yeah.
to talk about Black pathology, you don't talk about Black psychologists or studies on Black people. You usually talk about the theories that white people gave you about Black people, right?
Uh-huh.
That's how you get compensatory masculinity. That's how you get toxic masculinity. Toxic masculinity is nothing but what used to be called in the early 1900s compulsive masculinity. Is the idea that if you negate, and this all these studies were done actually on poor white boys. The idea was simple. If you take a white man and you
Mhm.
make him poor and you take his father away, what is he going to do to try to reinstill masculine value? He's going to turn to deviance. He's going to pretend he's tough, and he's going to replace the notion of the father with other groups of men. Right. So
Mhm.
that's how they used to explain gangs back in the day.
Yep.
Right. So what do we say about black men? Well, black men don't have any father figures,
Correct.
right? So we justify and say, well, we don't need father figures because the black community is not pathological. So black men then, even when they're raised by black women, are somehow imitating patriarchy, and because they're not real men, right? they're even though they're raised by black women in the same homes as black women are,
Yeah.
they're patriarchal and they're using violence to compensate for what's being taken away from them for not being patriarchal. You
Mhm.
see,
Mhm.
we have this amalgamation of ideas and axioms that have no sociological or historical proof because we're not the ones that created the systems or the ideological mechanisms that use them to explain things.
Mhm.
Pretty much before the 1980s, black people were explained as being inferior,
Yeah.
right? Black
Yeah.
men and women were thought to be black women were thought to be masculine as heads of households. Black men were thought to be effeminate, and that's where all this stuff comes from. And what
Mhm.
we've done, and this is the really insulting piece about it. What we've done is we've utilized gender theories that were based in criminology to explain the deviance, right? Because usually it's about violence, to explain the deviance we find among black people. So we will say
Mhm.
black men are compensating. That's why we have higher rates of domestic violence. Black men are misogynist. That's why we have higher levels of sexual abuse in our communities. Now you ignore all the male victims. You ignore all the child abuse that we see in the child maltreatment data,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
you focus just on black men as perpetrators. And
Yeah.
what that does to us as a people is
Mhm.
it numbs us from looking at sociological factors like poverty,
Yeah.
previous trauma, recidivism, alcohol, or substance
Mhm.
abuse, like
Mhm.
things that white people get really, really big grants to do, like to study in their own communities. And
Yeah.
it gives us this one word, patriarchy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And what our work has been doing, what Black Male Study Scholars have been doing, is really pushing back on the idea. It asks very simple questions, bro. If you can look at domestic violence studies among whites and they recognize male victims and they ask, did the mother abuse the young boy as a child? Did this transfer into his adulthood? Were the parents poor and abusive? Did that transfer into his adulthood? Was he addicted to drugs or born because with fetal alcohol syndrome? Does that transfer into adulthood? Why do you refuse those same epidemiological questions applied to the black population? You see,
Well,
so they get
yeah.
science,
Yeah.
we get bell hooks, we get
Yeah.
patriarchy,
Yeah. And
right?
listen, I appreciate so much of that key part that you mentioned in terms of if I could kind of consolidate it,
Sure.
the conclusions on what to do with black men is never going to be based on their humanity. It's going to be
Yeah.
based on the
Yeah.
pathological view of them
Mhm.
being seen as just creatures of habit and impulse and depravity. And now it makes sense where it's like you'll even see it on the wider realm. Right now, there's a big discussion on social media. It's been trending for a while. I hope to do the episode this week on the whole trending thing of black fatigue. You're getting a whole bunch of people. You're getting um and this is why I try to tell, especially actual foundational Black Americans who just start using these terms, you kind of got to be careful because sometimes what these people that are using it, they have this framework that you're describing when they're talking about the Black community.
Mhm.
And like you said, they'll only look at the results. They won't look at the socialization that created an environment for a greater likelihood for these type of things to occur. A great example would be like imagine if there was a federal law or state-based law like Oklahoma recently, I think in the last year or two, where automatic 50-50 custody unless either parent gives up their rights or is a risk to the child. If you start with that as a default position, that by default is going to change um, uh, not only child custody, but it's also going to change uh, when they're making child support payments. Because if
Of
you
course.
have the
Yeah.
child 50% of the time, that effectively means neither of you have to give each other anything. And that completely probably will significantly change how much Black men are able to be in their child's life more often if they're not able to do life with the mother of the child versus leaving it up to her or the court, rather than looking at the sociological reasons for why a lot of men, and especially men in the community, aren't involved in that way. In looking at these other factors that could potentially help fix it, they'll just say all the men are trash. Black men don't want to be involved. And I'm like, I've talked to some of them, and I've learned the hard way. A lot of people's viewpoints on Black fatherhood, on Black men
Mhm.
stepping up, is based off of women and mothers. They
Yeah,
they never
absolutely.
talked. They did not talk to their fathers. They never asked dad or grandpa what was his perspective. And
Mhm.
and this is what happens when you only look at the results and consequences of something, but you don't even acknowledge that they're consequences. You just see it as the effects of a depraved culture, which is true, but ignoring all the other sociological implication factors that
Yeah,
contributed to how we
yeah,
got there. This is what
yeah,
happens when you get people in these discussions to start talking about other groups that they're not a part of, or having the mentality of a white supremacist or white nationalist, regardless of what skin color they are.
yeah.
You'll only This is what happens when you'll get um uh black individuals from all over the world to come here, and then they'll talk down on the black community because they're using the same mental framework you've been describing all night.
No,
Let me
absolutely.
ignore everything that contributed to how these people got here and just focus on the current behaviors.
Yeah,
And I'm like,
I completely agree with that because but you have to remember white people export their racist ideologies,
mm-hmm.
right? This
Social media,
is not.
movies. Yep.
Yeah, so I mean, movies, academia, and research. Um, I mean, economics. You have to understand, anti-black misandry, the hatred of black men, is the key to enter most liberal arts departments in the United States.
Mm,
People will adamantly say, and I mean, you can actually do searches of speeches by black
mhm,
feminist, scholars, both men and women, and they'll
mhm.
just say like black men are misogynist, black men kill women. Now the data doesn't support that at all, right?
Right.
But that's what they say, and their universities didn't have a problem with it. Their departments don't have a problem with it. You see, now you can't do that to Jewish men. You can't do that to white men. You can't do that with any other group of people where you go in and say half of their population are animals, beasts, bullet bags, trash, etc. But you can when it comes to black people.
Mm,
And something you said that was really important. It is there's a huge resentment in the academy when black feminists are charged with imitating or propagating white supremacy. But when you ask yourself very simple questions,
mhm,
who are the people that created compensatory masculinity? Who are the people that have a stake in denying the sexual victimization of black men and boys or their vulnerability to domestic violence and domestic homicide?
mm,
There's never an answer to that question
mhm,
because when you start giving those answers, it involves the whole community. You see, what they really want is a division between black men and women that can't be overcome with a rational discussion. And what often happens in black feminist discourses and ideology is because the black man is locked into the perpetrator role, there's no need to say we need to look at these other factors.
yeah,
That he
cool.
is a rapist. I grew up with him. He is a misogynist. I grew up with him. He is a criminal. You
Mhm,
see? So
mhm,
then when black scholars come and say, hey, 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 hold on. If that's true, then why was he abused as a young boy? Why did his father leave his mother because he was a victim of abuse? And of course,
mhm.
this is in all cases,
Yep,
right?
yep,
But like think about the cases that we've seen, right? In my book, I document a case where a black mother abused a young black boy. He was crying. She split his testicles and put it back together with glue, right? With super glue, right? This is the level of abuse that we sometimes see in our communities, right? I was in
mm,
London, right, when we first tried to schedule getting together, and I
mhm,
was I was traveling to London to give a keynote on domestic violence. Man, I ended up breaking down right? I got through all the presentation. You know, a sister, she was a psychotherapist. She asked me, well, how do I feel about it? You know, and you know, a tear came down, and then more came after it.
Mm,
And I tried to explain that there's not a lot of possibility for someone who takes the vulnerability of black men to sexual and physical violence seriously, because all the world is willing to conceptualize black men as are beasts that are being put down, right, by bullets, by people kneeling on their necks and saying, well, that's not just. But even within the academy, you have black people saying, well, we still need to have cops. And even if they do kill black men, we need them to protect black women from black men.
mm,
So what you have is never a full conversation or endorsement of anti-black racism, because part of the issue is that the systems that are oppressing black people are
mm,
rationalized as goods to protect some groups of people in the black community from black men.
yeah.
And what that does to us, right? See, it's not just that you think like white people. What it does to us, just like Trump was saying in Chicago, it gives a rationalization for the domination of black people. So
Mm,
if he, so in Trump's line, of course, but that's not the point. The point is he's saying, hey, they're black women, beautiful African American women. Right? He wanted to
mhm,
stress that,
mhm,
asking us to come to Chicago to clean up the streets,
yeah.
and we're willing to use the military. So what is he doing? What is that rhetoric doing? The same thing it does when he talks about Muslim men or Mexicans. It is inciting the idea that these groups of men are threats, that they have
Mhm,
to be contained. And hey, half of that population wants us there because
yeah.
these beautiful black women have asked us to come. Now, there have been, to the credit, there have been sisters who've been online and even officially in government saying that is not what black women are saying, right? That is
Mm,
not what black women generally are saying. I want to make that clear.
mhm,
But what I'm pointing to is the threat construction of the black male as a threat to his own people, to his own women and children, that has historically been mobilized as a justification to eliminate, incarcerate, and condemn black males in the United States. And that piece of the conversation, as if it is only white people and not the rhetoric and threat constructions that are circulating in our community, that circulates on those podcasts we were discussing briefly before the show.
yeah.
That's not circulating in the works of people like Bell Hooks that says that a black nerd challenge they use for domestic violence to reclaim manhood. You
Mhm,
see, when it comes to black males, that story is the same. And the irony of this, sir, the
mhm,
irony of this
mhm,
is that you could look at any oppressed population in the world, any group of people that have suffered from colonialism, enslavement, etc., and you will find the exact same dynamics. So if you take away their language, their culture, their employment, their history, you take away their ability to self-determine,
yeah.
you see the same rates of domestic violence globally. You see the same kind of abuse of women and children globally.
Mhm,
You see the
mhm,
same kind of abuse and violence against young boys globally,
mhm, mhm,
right? Because the predominant across the world, the predominant perpetrator of violence against children are women. But when you control for class, it's poor women, women who are stressed about making ends meet, people who are suffering from other sociological factors. So why is it that we can see in global health, right, domestic violence,
yeah.
we can see how the trauma of violence circulates through communities and peoples and histories, but when it becomes black people's exception,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Black
For
people,
us, for us,
violence
it's
doesn't circulate in our communities; it's violent black men.
yeah. For us, it's genetic. That's the
Yeah.
basic conclusion that they've come to, and it's strange just because Charlie Kirk, even I have my gripes with some of his approaches and how he approached data, but even Charlie Kirk would acknowledge the era where a lot of this stuff wasn't happening. And he would
Mhm.
acknowledge a time period where we had the intact households, the family units, the criminality wasn't what it is now, and he was able to acknowledge that. And then now today, they're making DNA, genetic, inherent trait arguments to explain everything that we're seeing right now, and they'll literally will ignore everything else that you just said that's contributed to it. So I appreciate you sharing this type of stuff.
Well, I
Let me get some
appreciate that.
yeah, let me get you some
I,
of these chats real quick to make sure I
sure.
haven't missed anything real quick. Tunny, I did mention that for the $5. Appreciate you for sure. Excited to learn from Tommy Curry, studying the man not. Inspirational truth. Oh, $50. Appreciate you. Always good to see the fellow Louisiana and Dr. Curry. Brother, for sure. Thank you for the $49.99 for sure. Mike of Malice, Leon 008, $10. Thank you both. Appreciate you, good brother, for that. Sir Francis, welcome, welcome, welcome. Big Mo, 89, $20. Dr. Curry, thank you for the work that you do. You've been instrumental to many of the psychological changes I've experienced through espousing the underlying issues that contribute to the Black male experience. Thank you. Mason Inc., $50. Hey, thank you for the $50. I'm not. And Trackstar 2, $5. I'm a Black man and I don't feel sorry when YNs turn Chicago, Memphis, Detroit into war zones. I feel sorry for the Black men who gets mistakenly grouped along with them. And even with this Trackstar, I'll say this. I think multiple things could be true because I noticed it during the George Floyd era where there were people like Candace Owens and many conservatives and people to the far right that because of his criminal background and history, they lost sight of his humanity. This is literally the discussion we're talking about now. And how, when that happens, this is why wars in the Middle East occur the way that they do. And all your tax dollars and bombs can bomb 6-7 different Black, brown countries. And you don't really feel or think anything of it. Because at the end of the day, when you've kind of been conditioned to see people or particular types of people as less than or less than human, if and when they die, it doesn't really matter in your worldview, because in the end, it's like, well, they're a criminal, they're Black, they're poor, they're this, they're that. There's always going to be like a rationalization for why you shouldn't have any empathy for them. Just because you have empathy for somebody doesn't mean that you excuse their behavior. And sometimes their behavior can be reckless and can result in their own death. Doesn't mean that I'm going to cheer when Charlie Kirk dies, and doesn't mean that I'm going to be posting memes of saying how happy I am that George Floyd is dead either. Being able to still see and recognize the humanity in anyone, regardless of who they are, what they've done, it's a tough thing that I think a lot of us have to kind of get reprogrammed to realize that this is the very statement like this is actually the talking point that we're dealing with now whenever we bring up what's happening to us, what's happening to men, what's happening to boys, what's happening to Black men. This statement is what they're saying when we bring up men's issues. So just kind of keep that in mind when you reference stuff like this. Couture Leotards, thank you for the $10. Do conservative values allow for Black men to rise like other groups in the U.S.? Is it too general and Black male issues are too far outside of the goal of conservative values? What do you think about that? Because I had a similar question that I wanted to kind of run by you about this, where it was like, is either political party in the U.S., in your opinion, interested in advocating or addressing any men's issues from your lens?
It depends. It depends what we mean by that. Because I actually wanted to say something about Kirk's statement.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think really quickly, Charlie Kirk was the kind of person that had some of the most superficial takes on Black people.
Yeah.
And I understand the talking point. So like if I could turn the camera to my shelves, like I have this whole library basically of like conservative, family arguments about like how the Black race would be better if it was just a nuclear family and a Christian family, and right, because this is what I meant when I said that there was arguments about men being better men in the 80s and 90s that specifically revolved around nuclear families, fathers as role models, etc. Right? That data or those arguments have a certain effectiveness and appeal for poor white families, because historically what would happen is poor white men, because they were working class, the fathers, just like Black men, would either not be in the home or they would have to leave and send money back. So what they wanted to do among white people was stabilize the nuclear family, because at the basis of white conservatism is the conservation of values, and one of the primary institutions of preserving values is the family,
the nuclear
right?
family. Yeah.
Now, starting with that premise, here's what Charlie Kirk tried to do. He would say, well, the Black community has fewer fathers in the home, right? We know as a data point that doesn't stop Black male involvement. Black men are are the most involved groups of men across any male measurement in the United States. And this is a longitudinal study. It's not like a snapshot for a year. This is across a decade, right?
Mhm.
Now, what Charlie Kirk would do is he would say, hey, the problem's the white race, right? If we had black men who were in homes and black men who were responsible and black men who had a culture of success, right? Thriftiness, Christianity, etc., and civility,
Mhm.
these problems would disappear. So what he did is he said, look, you have a configuration of the black community, right, that led to the same outcomes of white people. We have, when we had nuclear families to fix those outcomes, the problem with black people is that they're ghetto, their culture is pathological, and they're being raised by single mothers. That's not true, right? Black women are not making black men deviant. Poverty in single mother households, abuse in single mothers households, lack of economic opportunity and segregation, those things contribute to deviance, right?
Mhm.
Now, and it's important for us to make that distinction because this gets to the conservative point. I understand the issue that Black Americans have with liberals. I do not consider myself a liberal precisely because of how they have historically treated Black people and how they view Black men.
Correct.
However,
Mhm.
we have to get out of binary thinking. Conservative values that ask us to conserve certain aspects of white societies, democracy, nuclear families, Christianity, capitalism, etc.,
Mhm.
are not the vehicles of Black liberation.
Mhm.
Now, Black wealth accumulation, Black property ownership in
Mhm.
a world where there were rights to protect that wealth and property, that's a different conversation.
Yeah.
But that's somewhat counterfactual because we do not live in America now where Black people are just able to accumulate wealth, compete with white people on equal footing,
Mhm.
especially after Trump, right?
Mhm.
Given these constraints.
Mhm.
So if you ask, well, what's my view on conservative values? My first question is, well, which conservative? If we're talking about Black conservatives that are mimicking the talking points of white supremacists under Trump, or under the certainly from the paleo conservatives that were creators of the Tea Party all the
Mhm.
way forward,
Mhm.
no, because
Correct.
there's no value there that's about Black uplift.
At all.
Now, if you're asking me, well, Professor Curry, has there been a history of Black conservatism that's focused on family unity, thrift, Christianity, capital accumulation, property ownership that disagreed with some liberal values? Then I would say, yeah,
Yep.
there has historically been a debate all the way from Washington to George Schuler, et cetera, even Kelly Miller to a certain extent, that have argued that Black people can uplift themselves in the United States.
Mhm.
However, those are ideological political arguments. No one has a glass bowl that said that if we had nuclear families to a higher degree, that solves the problem any more than it's just describing now that we have single mother households and that creates the problem. We have no
Mhm.
evidence for that going into the future. What we have to realize is we have a system that is socializing values of negation and dehumanization among our people that is producing certain behaviors and certain conditions that do not allow us to be free.
Mm.
And we have to understand the relationship between the ideological, Black people or Black men are trash,
Mhm.
right? Black
Mhm.
people have no future. Black women are evil, demons, da 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 da, right? All
Mhm.
these negative racial stereotypes and how we are enacting those against one another in a system that allows neither one of us to actually be empowered. Think
Mm.
about it. Just
Mhm.
think about it for one moment. There was a big release when Trump fired 365,000 Black women,
Correct.
right?
Yep.
What did the Democrats do? The first thing Democrats do, we need to hold town forums or create initiatives because Black women are suffering. Now, the 365,000 jobs that were lost do not outnumber the number of Black men that have historically been unemployed. What it did is it took this kind of pseudo middle class that Black women have, educated Black women have been very proud of, it eliminated them and dropped them back to the underclass. Now, was that a result of Black men or was that a result of racism?
Yeah. I mean, obviously racism
Now,
yeah, go ahead, continue.
well, no, but if that's a result of racism,
Mm.
notice how a white person's action, one decision in a matter of months, completely changed the class configuration of a racial group. You
Mm.
see, before we said they're educated Black women, These working class black men are unfit as mates, and one white legislative move eliminated that argument because it dropped everybody to the same economic class and status.
Boom.
You
Boom.
see, this is what I mean. If
Mm,
you take a pathological view of black people, you would say, well, the reason that this group of black men didn't succeed is because what? They didn't try hard enough. They didn't have the motivation, as Toure said.
mm-hmm.
And in one sweep, is this what happened to those educated black women? Oh no. They're the
300,000.
same class strata now as these poor working class black men.
Yeah.
You see, this is what I mean. We don't control the system that determines whether or not we work or don't work. We don't
Mm-hmm.
control the system that decides whether or not educated black people necessarily are guaranteed a job. So then when we blame each other and say one person's not good enough, if black women could become unemployed in a matter of months from government positions that gave them a middle class lifestyle, why do you not think that that's exactly the same strategy they used on working class black men for the last several decades? You see, this is why this is the difference. This is the difference, sir, between a professor who is
Mm-hmm.
asking you to think through the consequences of government policy and white supremacists targeting of black people and a
Mm-hmm.
person who gets to say, let's fan internal division and hatred based on economic divisions that we did not produce.
Yeah. Yeah.
The motivation of getting the education has nothing to do with what the system has now said is the position of all black people. And instead of us asking the most fundamental question any group of people would ask, what does that mean for how we make economic divisions and differences between ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
We
Mm-hmm.
say, this is the problem with the liberal. We care about black women. They're our constituency. So let's fight on behalf of black women. See, the liberal says the black woman is the chosen black person.
Yep.
She's the one. So even though black men vote very close to black women in terms of democratic policies and platforms and politicians and presidential candidates, they say
Mm-hmm.
we care about women. And what does that fan in our communities? Division. Why?
Yep.
Because you have black people doing the same thing, and only black women are being recognized. Only black women are given resources. Only black women are given political access.
Yeah.
Because in the white liberal, they rule us through representation. The white conservative says, hey, segregation is not a bad idea. Let's keep our white race pure. Let's increase the numbers so that we're not replaced. And then
Mm-hmm.
we'll let these black people kind of deal with themselves. We'll let them take each other out because we know poverty,
Mm-hmm.
segregation, and depression leads to higher rates of homicide. So that's how they rule us. The white liberal says something a little different. The white liberal says, hey, we want legitimacy in our social systems. We
Mm-hmm.
want the illusion of democracy and free choice and fair elections. So what do? We choose which black person we pull up. We choose this group of black people that we pull up. Make sure they're not too radical. Make sure they believe in the group that we wish to be spokespersons for them. And
Preacher.
those are the people that shall rule over others.
Celebrities.
So
Yeah.
exactly. So then I ask the question, if we can see this happen, why are black men and women fighting each other over notions of gender, over
Mm-hmm.
notions of employment, over notions of education, when it has just been shown to us that the minute you get a white supremacist in office, all the things you claim that we worked for and earned are taken away in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
This goes back to the idea that we think that black men become culpable for conditions they did not author or create because they are pathological and not thought to be human beings,
Mm-hmm.
rather than saying, are there aspects of systems? Are there aspects of targeting? Are
Mm-hmm.
there things we're not perceiving that we need to study
Yep.
to improve the outcomes of black people?
It's
And
tough.
that becomes the basis
It,
by
it,
which
it,
we have to intervene in this problem.
it's tough because, like you said, it's an illusion. It's a very effective matrix in terms of how to think. It's binary, and um, I sense and realize and know why a lot of other black men are leaving the Democrat Party, and some are running all the way to the right. Some are identifying as
Mhm.
conservative. Myself, I think most normal people. It depends the topic, whether they're a little bit more liberal or progressive or a little
Sure,
bit more
issue based,
conservative,
yeah.
right? I think that's most people. With me being an independent and being registered with the Green Party, I view with such a huge percentage of our voting block always kind of being a captured electorate when it comes to major elections.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
in acknowledging exactly what you're saying. I'm realizing for me in this platform, I feel like I have to try to approach things as being a deconstructionist,
Mhm.
where I have to almost damn near tear down the allegiance, tear down the loyalty, point out the contradictions, and show what you're talking about. Where most people that look like you and me have no problem acknowledging your critiques of the right,
Yeah.
acknowledging the issues with
Yeah.
Trump, with the right, with Republicans. That's actually boring to me because we already know, we
We
already
already
see.
know. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're captured on the other end when not only are they not delivering on the goods for us collectively, but they're also doing things that's negatively impacting the ideological view that our women have towards the men and vice versa. So
Yeah,
for me,
absolutely.
as a deconstructionist, I'm trying to tear it down to the point where I would prefer that we as a unit, or at least as an overwhelming majority of us, were independents. And we put 80% of our time. Now, you kind of critiqued it in terms of like the capitalism
Mhm.
economic approach. In my mind, that's the option. That's the viable option that we have. If we have a political system where
No,
it's
that's
rigged, like my
mhm.
view is like Booker T Washington, like
Mhm.
outside of us doing our jobs, doing what we can, staying out of trouble, and then quietly behind the scenes working together to take over territory,
Mhm.
get some farmland, and do things on our own, so we're not necessarily as beholden to a president comes in and snaps his finger
Oh,
and
absolutely.
this
Absolutely.
group's done, that group's done. I
Mhm.
think that when we have more political unified, not political, unified economic base, I think that
Yeah.
that will be far more effective than anything that we're doing on in the voting booth. Because this
No,
person kind of
no, no,
asked,
listen.
right? Yeah, she said, follow up. So if Couture Leotard said, so if it's not conserving families and building wealth through the family units like the past, what solution are you offering for Black men to achieve in 2025 in the future?
No, that's a great question. I wanted to just clarify real quick.
Mhm.
Listen, we have to this is more of a general economic issue. Capitalism will always require the exploitation of some other group. Like we understand that just between commodity forms and how like workers are alienated from what they produce. It's very very
Mhm.
basic idea. We know somebody has to be poor screwed there.
Yep.
That doesn't mean it doesn't have practical utility, right? That's so I want
Facts.
to clarify that, right?
Mhm.
I I am not the I am not the kind of person that says, hey, because capitalism is an exploitative system that, right, there's not uses for it, especially in societies where, unless we're all willing to just go out and die for the revolution, which I think the America has made very clear that's not going to happen, right?
Mhm.
White people are not going to band with black people around economics or workers' rights. We are stuck with this system. So I do believe that wealth accumulation under a capitalist system is necessary. However, right, this is what we that doesn't mean we become indoctrinated by capitalism so that we try to exploit our members of our own group or others,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? That's what I mean. We are an intelligent people.
Mhm.
And I want to say this very clearly. I understand your position as a deconstructionist.
Yeah.
When I was exposed to some of your videos, I remember, I watched and I listened. I'm not really not a person about agreement or disagreement.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was like, okay, so he's giving it this, I understand what you're doing. It's like you're criticizing liberals, not, I won't say sympathetic, but you're entertaining the argument by conservatives, right? I get it. And I actually applaud that because I'm not a person that's afraid of ideas.
Yeah.
You see, what I think often happens to us is we will support, and I think this is what you experience with some of the pushback to what you're saying. We are a people who tend to support popular ideas and want to enforce censorship and derision to others.
Yep.
And what you're doing, which is something I applaud you for, is you're challenging the notion that we should assume one set of ideas are by its actual being good for us.
Yep.
So there's nothing that says that the Democratic Party is fundamentally good for us. If we had a strong black conservative party that was about black, wealth accumulation, black safety, black neighborhoods, that could be good for us as well. That
Mhm.
I want to be clear, that doesn't exist under Trump right now.
Sure.
And I don't think it's existed at any point, since Reagan. Like that's not the message we get from black conservatives. But
Mhm.
it's possible. because it has existed before in the 70s and 80s when people talked about capitalism, banking, strong black communities, neighborhoods, etc. We have to deal with this problem. We have to be a thinking people, right? And I want to use that to kind of answer the question the person online asked. For black men to thrive, we are not going to do so outside of the uplift of black people.
Okay.
And I want to explain that for a moment. We are in a political system and government that has utilized segregationist and Jim Crow tactics to eliminate economic distinctions between black people,
Mm-hmm.
to confine the whole group to a racial position that is now subordinate to its preference for white and Jewish people, and within a community that no longer has solidarity or unity.
Mm-hmm.
So, to talk about black men rising in this world
Mm.
simply because they're black men completely misses any structural analysis of how we understand racism.
Correct.
I am not, black male study scholars are not trying to create a black male political subject that benefits at the expense of everyone else.
Okay.
It is trying to create a black consciousness that recognizes why black men are targeted, why black men are excluded, and how that exclusion is used to oppress the whole black race. Its criticism of feminism is not, or black feminism is not that we deny that black women suffer. It
Mm-hmm.
is that the theories used to explain black female suffering necessarily condemn, demonize, and pathologize black men and boys.
Facts.
That being said, in exposing that, it requires us to have a form of solidarity and unity that many black people are not going to be inclined to do so because they identify themselves as outside of black men. Because they hold such negative views of black men, they don't see themselves as being part of the same group, sharing the same interests, or
Mm-hmm.
having a necessary allegiance to black male existence and success.
Yeah.
So, in order for us to fix that, we have to create new values, new conversations about oppression, our position in the United States right now, and what we aim to achieve as a group of people. And I want to be
Mm-hmm.
clear here. The arguments that we see around white men and boys currently give the illusion that they're being presented as them in a vacuum, but they are deliberately appealing to white decision makers,
Mm-hmm.
like the people that watch The View, to take care of their own people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Make no mistake about it. The arguments to change, the arguments to attend to white men's suffering and white men's education goals ultimately have the outcome of improving the benefits economically, socially, in terms of marriage and intimate relationships for white people.
Mm-hmm.
We're the only groups of people assuming that if we help black men, it hurts black women, right? The argument, the reason that their arguments are seen as progressive and able to be platformed on The View is because they're saying, hey, help white men, help these men who are afraid to date. Look at our population numbers,
Mm-hmm.
right? You know,
Mm-hmm.
this is what gets me. Galloway is a professor,
Yeah.
right, of economics. He's not stupid, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a huge fan of his argument, but he's not stupid. He's making an argument that says, look, the interest of the Democratic Party, the interest of the white race, is assisted when white men are doing well.
Yeah. Facts.
That's bottom line.
Objective.
The reason
Objective
right,
facts.
is because, yeah, it's just facts, right? The
Yeah.
reason that is called progressive rather than conservative is because the conservatives are saying, well, look, we need to reinstitute respect and valor for masculinity because they say that men should rule. And that's the only way to have strong men, you have strong society and strong values. The
Mm-hmm.
progressive says, well, look, we don't want to necessarily make that kind of offensive argument, right? Because once the conservatives are out of power, that's not an economically profitable argument to be stuck with. So
Yeah.
let's couch it in reintegrating men into our social, our moral, and our empathetic capacities so that we care about their outcomes in education,
Mm-hmm.
dating, sociality, and mental health. Both outcomes are the same. White men do better, white families grow, white populations grow.
Yeah.
When you talk about this very same issue with black people, you say, hey, Curry's arguing that black men are targeted because in most wars, genocides, and conflicts, men are seen as enemy combatants. And because we're in racialized systems, as the enemy, black men are going to be targeted, eliminated, incarcerated, and murdered. And what does all the data show us?
Yeah.
And what are we missing? Well, we miss that that's not the only way to exterminate black men. There's also this existential violence of domestic abuse, child sexual abuse, child physical abuse, and negation, verbal and psychological abuse. And only in our race does that automatically mean zero-sum games. Why? Because we've had a history of being pit against one another. And because the liberal academic structure has only accommodated one group at the expense of others, raising black women and black liberals and black feminists generally over other groups of people who may be working class and militant, right, and hold different views, we say that we're at war with each other. But at some point, facts have to matter, right? It's just a fact. Nuclear families tend to do better economically, right? But do we have to, right? But here's the thing. But that's usually because of two-parent households or two-partner households, right? It doesn't follow from that it has to be Christian, it has to be heterosexual. It doesn't. None of that follows. The issue is largely economic trends. Once I control for class, we see the outcomes improve, right? But we're not taught. We're not teaching our people. You see what I'm saying? We're not having the podcasters say, "Hey, here's how this issue operates," right? Here's how some black economists like Sandy Darity or Derek Hamilton would explain social mobility among black people, right? We're not doing that work. We are having wars because we look, as you say, to the outcome. Black women who have social mobility, black men who do not. See, our situation, condition, and history are different, so our conversation has to become more sophisticated. And that's why I get offended when I hear these podcasts like I don't know if it's Grits and Eggs, but it's the Kyle guy, Deontay Kyle, where he says these statements, right? Well, black men are angry, and that's the only emotion they can have, and that's what leads to violence against women. Well, when you look at the data and intimate partner violence, anger usually isn't the first or the most significant. In aggression, it's not the most significant variable that leads to escalation or injury against women. It may be a component, but it's not the most significant. So what is our investment in articulating black men as purely angry? And furthermore, why would black men as human beings not be angry about their repression, oppression, and dehumanization if what we're saying is true?
Facts.
We choose pathology over petification of reflection.
Yeah.
We
over
choose to
anything.
pathologize and reduce. Yeah, exactly. And that's what, man, for years. I've been doing this for years. I started Black Male Studies around 2015, 16. And for years I'm showing the data, and I'm talking to people, and I'm trying to show how we view ourselves. And I've been attacked, right? I've been attacked, I've been slandered. There've been people, when I've applied for jobs, there were black feminists that would like call in and try to make sure people didn't hire me. That's all that's happened. All that's happened, right? It would be disingenuous of me. It'd be remiss of me not to tell people the truth about what it means to study black men as human beings at American universities. But despite that, I've also had black mothers who are worried about their sons ask me to make phone calls to speak with them. When I was in London, there was a black woman who asked me if I would make a video for her son, because in the UK, there's not very many black professors. Like, I'm the only black professor in my discipline of philosophy. And she's like, could you make a video for my son telling him that he can do what you're doing? And I said, of course. So we have to be specific. There are black feminists in the US Academy that absolutely hate black men. There are white feminists, and there are black men who are feminists or liberals that absolutely hate working class heterosexual black men. That is just true.
And it's in the podcast, it's in academia, it's rampant. And I'm gonna say this, because I've seen it a couple times in the chat. People talking about victimhood talk. You had highlighted how Scott Galloway and others are raising the alarms about what's happening to men in general, what's happening to white men specifically, and how there's this starting to get this energy, there's this push to try to get more attention to focus on what's happening, that the boys and the men are falling behind. And like you said, once we start talking about unique challenges relating to the Black community or Black men, now it's victimhood talk.
Yeah.
So what
Yeah.
I've learned and observed is, I agree with you for sure that there is a huge segment of the actual within the Black community. There's a huge segment of the women and a small percentage of the men who are 100% not even interested in seeing anything that you talked about tonight as even an issue. Everything we got to point right back to women. The only way, I think, as controversial as it is, and even despite us not having a whole lot of allies as a collective group, I really do believe until we get some wins with other men in other groups who also look at some of these laws that we're talking about that probably needs to change in the family court, custody, 50-50 custody, maybe potentially the false allegation registry that you guys put together with Dr. Tia San. I think if we came up with just 3 of those and got as many men as possible and like-minded women who either just sees it and acknowledges it, has sons of their own or men in their lives that they care about, I think that's the first step. I think that
but that's
yeah, I think that's, to me, that's the step, because I think if we isolate and be like, well, let's just focus in on ourselves, we're not a big enough voting block demographic to really do anything. So I think at this point, it almost seems like, what would the majority of men, if you sat them down, asked them a list of questions, what would probably be like their top 3 things that they would say that's unfair? We need to push for this and demand this in every future local and federal election. And I would, given that it would be things that are kind of go across racial lines, the things that are kind of
divorce, employment, custody. Yeah. Look, no, again, specificity. If you're saying, Curry, do you think we will have shared interests with other groups of men around paternity fraud, child custody? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I would say there will be things that we would benefit from, but we will not be the primary benefactors of them. Right? Because because just think about it. Let's say you change, family court proceedings. Do working class poor Black men have access to private lawyers that are be able to take advantage necessarily of those changes? Right?
Yeah.
Are we going to have? You see what I'm saying? The issue, my issue is not saying that we don't have anything in common with other groups of men in terms of disadvantages, but it would be remiss of me not to point out the specificity, because let me explain what I see happening. I see people making these kind of general arguments about men, and making claims about, well, men generally are oppressed. And what we forget about that is that what we're seeing with white populations is a very recent reversal. So there was a time where white men owned property, they still hold disproportionate political power. They were outperforming women in education, right, especially in the 80s, et cetera. And there was a reversal of that trend. And that's what they're responding to. What Black men are responding to is the fact that this has always been the case. It was documented since 1927 by Du Bois.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You see, and that's the difference. The specificity doesn't mean that we can't be politically minded, right? Now you say, well, sure, do we need to form interest groups or strategic coalitions with certain groups of men, right? It's probably not going to be white men actually under this political climate, but other groups of men to pass certain policies, right? Sure, absolutely. Why would I say different? But if you say, is that the saving grace for the advancement of Black men? I would say absolutely not.
No.
It will attenuate some of the consequences that we deal with in family court, in child custody hearings, and maybe in employment discrimination. I actually see that probably being the least likely, given what Trump's recently done with DEI. But we could get some small benefits. But I don't want us to repeat the mistake of Black liberals and Black feminists, which presume that since we're the most favored Negro of the day of the time, that is actually mistaken as racial progress. Because as we just said earlier, all those affirmative action gains where black women were hired and given preferential or preference over black men have
Mhm.
been destroyed.
Yep.
So we have to be careful, right?
Yeah.
We can say, hey, at the pragmatic level, we need to attend to this, and it affects black men disproportionately, but other groups of men, right?
Mhm.
So do we
Mhm.
have an interest in changing the way that family courts deal with parental custody? Absolutely. Do we have issues of false allegation that disproportionately affect black men? Is there a reason we need to deal with that as a group?
Yep.
Absolutely. But
Mhm.
if we go, and I've seen this on Twitter, right? I'm not very good at social media, so forgive me, that's my only reference. Okay.
Mhm.
So I've
Mhm.
seen this on Twitter where people are, are trying to adopt, I don't want to say men's rights, but it's kind of this dialogue about this universal male oppression. And I try to make distinctions about that because we still live in countries where white men disproportionately hold political power alongside white women. Right?
Yeah.
The issue, white women have certainly demonstrated over the last 2 centuries that they are enemies of black people, especially black men. White
Mhm.
women have historically demonstrated that they hate black men, they will kill them, incarcerate them, castrate them symbolically for social power and prestige alongside white men.
Mhm.
But that doesn't mean that all women, you see what I'm saying,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
necessarily participate in the same kind of power, violence, and brutality against black men.
Mhm.
Right? Now, black feminism as an academic discourse has played a disproportionate role since the 1970s and 80s, demonizing and pathologizing black men.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
black women, because they suffer, have sought out recognition to escape that suffering. We need to criticize that move. But
Mhm.
does it mean that the black women who birth us in our communities should not be re-educated and re-socialized, their minds decolonized about what they've internalized about our people? We don't exist without one another. And as much as we
It's
want,
tough. Yeah.
it is tough. And I'm listen,
Listen, I'll tell you this because you've been doing this for in terms of black male studies for 10 years. I've been doing this for 1 year, and I'm telling you right now, the
I
level
know.
of 60 plus years now of multi-generational conditioning and indoctrination,
Yeah,
it's so deeply embedded.
I
This is
agree.
the equivalent of somebody who gets deconstructed from being grown up their whole life being a Christian and then one day doesn't believe in Christ or God anymore,
Hmm.
right? Like it's such a jarring thing that most of them can't imagine that an ideology they've been espousing, being proud of, wearing as a badge
Hmm.
was not only antagonistic towards their men, but actually extremely destructive towards the community as a whole.
Oh, absolutely.
A lot of them
Absolutely.
don't even apologize in one-on-one conversations. So in my
Yeah.
head, I'm like, I picked up what you mentioned about the whole men's rights thing and
Hmm.
the pros and cons of that. I don't know if there's any other unifying thing we could even go off of to get enough political people politically to get behind something that will allow black men to actually get some wins to actually
Hmm.
have more say in their child's life and in their personal everyday lives. Like outside of men's rights, I don't know if there's any. I think who was the writer of Boondocks? What was his name? Oh,
Guffey.
mm-mm. He had did a speech years ago, and he had said that the clock for the black
Yes, I
community.
know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yep, yep. The writer and
Yeah.
creator of Boondocks. He had said that our social equity clock ran out and was already running out 8 years ago. And I think a lot of the unifying things, even with Black Lives Matter coming and going, yep, here we go, Aaron McGruder. Um,
McCruder,
yep,
yeah.
yep. He stated that we ran out of chances. The opportunity when we had to get a huge segment of the population to get behind, listen, this has happened to this group. We got to get behind them. I think those days are effectively kind of over. I think once Black Lives Matter kind of came and went, and then also Trump's election both times, I think that's kind of
Hmm.
a wrap in terms of people actively coming to advocate to help us in any significant, meaningful way,
No,
uniquely, right? So I think at this point, for men, what you're saying, what I'm saying, I think the men's rights move is the way to go, not necessarily to demonize women, but to push for what happened in Oklahoma to happen in all 50 states. And I'm like,
look,
regardless of what lawyer you can or
mhm.
can't afford, if the judge is defaulted to start at a certain position, I think that that's huge. I think that that'll significantly change a lot of what's happening in our. A lot of these men are getting not just black men, men in general. They're going to jail because of this stuff because they
No,
can't
I
afford.
understand that. I understand that. And that's here's the thing.
Mhm.
So I agree with you on the outcome and policy perspective.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'll be honest with you, a few years ago, this had to
Mhm.
be when the Man I first came out. It was maybe a year or two after that. People were saying like you're men's rights, you're MRA, and I didn't know what it was
Mhm.
because I'm an academic. I don't really travel, in these online streets.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you know me, I started researching it. Right? I went and read books about it. I looked
Mhm.
at Farrell's arguments, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so I was like, all right, I get it. I'm not I'm not opposed to policies that benefit men who are suffering from child custody, false accusations, etc.
Yeah.
Those disproportionately affect black men,
Mhm.
racialized men. I agree with that. Here's what I'm asking. In this world, okay, so like
Mhm.
under Trump,
Yeah.
okay, will let's say all that passes and black men hook their latch on to the men's rights movement. We are just trading places with new masters. And here's why.
Mhm. Mhm.
The economic, political, and social capital under Trump is drawn primarily to Christian white men in this country.
Mm.
His whole view of giving subsidies to white families to have more babies is about producing one different demographic outcome over another.
Mhm.
So you can, and this is what I'm saying, if you want to attenuate or if you want to diminish the consequences of unfair systems, okay, I'm with you. We agree.
Mhm.
If we think that a men's rights movement run by white supremacists that disproportionately hold the political and economic power of this country
Mhm.
in their hands is going to equally share rights and access to rights with groups they think are trying to replace them, I fundamentally disagree with that claim.
Understood.
And my explanation is not meant to dissuade black men from fighting for policies or any other group of men from fighting for
Mhm.
policies that decrease their harm. I'm not trying to do that. But what I am saying is that we are not in a period of time where those notions of manhood and masculinity are an equal playing field. The Trump administration, the Heritage Foundation, and Project 2025, the
Mhm.
arguments about replacement theory are very, very clear.
Yep.
Black men, Muslim men, Mexican men are a danger and threat to white civilization and white families.
Mhm.
So, in that political reality where the government and the opinion makers are saying that, what hope do black men have in latching their future to groups of people that have said that their existence and thriving in the country necessarily trades off with the survival of white civilization? And,
Yeah.
and if I may, this
Yeah.
is this is the problem with people like Magruder.
Mhm.
Magruder was right if we think that the only resistance that we have is about mobilizing white sympathy towards black causes.
Okay.
But that's not the only mechanism that black people have historically had to resist their oppression.
Correct.
You see, this is why I get upset, right?
Mhm.
Just as a philosopher and an intellectual historian, brother, time is a very long thing, and our lives are very short entities. We will never live to see the outcomes of our human actions transform the conditions that we anticipate we want to change.
Mhm.
It is the limitation of mortality, right?
Mhm.
So, what we are discussing is trying to get people to think differently about what happens when the environment, the politics, and the time allow it to.
Okay.
What we are always fighting for is
Mhm.
to build consensus and consciousness around the ideas and times that outlive us. So the time where black men will be free and black men will not be killed in the street, this will not be within our lifetimes because the structures, the politics, the Supreme Court that Trump has put in place will
Mhm.
they'll we may live a decade beyond them too. So we have to be realistic about what our purpose is, right?
Hmm.
Our purpose is to try to give our communities, to change the quality of their empathy towards issues that they're going to be willing to fight for as young men and women,
Hmm.
that they're going to be able to see shouldn't be the border between black men and women in our communities. It's to make these black women that have challenged you. I've seen some of these comments to say, hold on, maybe, just maybe,
Hmm.
my hatred of black men, my fear of straight black men doesn't start with that black man, but starts with my conditioning, my trauma, or be it starts with me and my issues that I need help for.
Okay. Hmm.
We cannot be the people that believe, right? And this is what really upsets me about a black liberal. The black liberal will say that they have taught white people who were slave owners to be equal, just, and fair-minded white citizens of America. These people owned us. They murdered us, killed us, lynched us, etc. We know the list. But you don't believe you can change your own people?
Mm.
You can change the slave owner, but you can't change the seasoned or conditioned slave.
Hmm. Hmm.
You see, it's
Yeah.
a and that comes from our internalized racism. It
Oof.
comes with the belief that there's some virtue that we could
Hmm.
appeal to, even in a white slave owner, in a KKK member, in a Republican that thinks that we're trying to replace them. There's some reason and rationality that they operate by that doesn't exist in our own people. And I refuse to believe that, because I know through the history of black resistance, there have always been black people that have internalized racism, which is and that's what anti-black misandry is. It is the internalization of the negativity towards the male target. We understand
Hmm.
that.
Hmm. Hmm.
But in the same way that you're saying, we need wins,
Yeah, we
right?
need
We
wins.
need wins.
Yeah.
If Are we going to have those wins in a world that says that they're trying to get rid of us, brother?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the political tone of the right and of the conservatives.
Hmm.
We have to be clear about this, because that white guy Tucker Carlson, I think,
Hmm.
came to London. He was arguing with Piers
Hmm.
Morgan, and he's like, "Hey, listen, London's changed. My family has a house here in London. Look at how dark London's become.
Yeah.
Look at how non-British London has become.
Hmm.
Look at what's happening in Italy, right? I live in the UK. So look at what's happening in Italy, the Netherlands, Vienna, Poland. Every group of people that are pushing back against the left and liberals are doing so on the basis of nationalism and reasserting that they will not be replaced by migrants or immigration or about other groups of Europeans that they consider to be ethnic minorities.
Hmm. Hmm.
So then ask ourselves, our issue then as
Hmm.
black men is with the system of people who deny us rights, who deny us employment, who deny us education, that see us as a threat to their reproduction. And
Yeah.
we can support policies that help us,
Hmm.
but let us not make the mistake that we're like other groups of men who are dealing with a problem of white boys not performing to the standard that they want for white men, versus black men and boys and brown men and boys and indigenous men and boys who were
Hmm.
never thought to be in the market for education and intelligence or even a soul or character in the first place. And
Yeah,
and, and we
our problems are my view is like our problems are obviously not identical. There is some overlap. And I
Mhm.
think that if we get some wins, even from the very group that we can't fully trust in, just on like Oklahoma, when Oklahoma makes a law change,
Yeah.
all Oklahomans get affected, right? That's what I'm
No,
talking
absolutely.
about, right?
Yeah.
So I
And
think
I think you're
that
right. I
if
think you're right in
yeah,
terms of policy. Yeah.
yeah, so I think that what I think is it's a two-tiered approach in my mind. I think you're probably saying the
Mhm.
same thing. We don't put our stock or our 100% of our faith in the political system that's already rigged and broken and corrupt in nature. We will approach it through the lens of first of all, I think we need to treat it very transactionally anyway.
No,
I think that
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
like for me, I have no problem with people being like, if I'm not getting anything for the vote, I'm not going to vote. I understand that logic.
Yeah.
I
Absolutely.
understand other people get super upset about it. My lens is, I
I think
think
you're
that
right about that.
yeah, I would rather one or either political party starts to lose elections over men sitting out and
Mhm.
recognizing if you're on the side of the political aisle where you heavily are dependent on a particular voting block to support and to come through. I'll say it this way: I believe that the way in which Democrats have responded and reacted to black men and masculine men in general and men's issues in general, which has been very lackluster and still a lot of blame shifting, and they haven't really, they spent $1 million just to talk about it. Like, it didn't lead towards anything. It's like there's studies about reparations. Didn't lead towards anything. I think that if 50% of black men had sat out or voted for Trump or voted third party like I did, I think it would have put a different level of urgency in their backpacks to respond differently than, oh, well, we got almost 80% of 72%, whatever percent of black men that voted, they still voted for her anyway. So we'll talk about it briefly and move on. That's kind of what happened. I think that what needs to happen is, if we're saying, oh, there's white supremacists over here, there's white supremacists over here, there's corruption over here, there's corruption over there, we can't trust this one, can't trust that. Outside of saying we're not going to do politics at all, we're going to have to make a decision on which side we think would be most likely with a loss to actually be reactive enough.
No, I agree with that. It's very Washingtonian of you.
Conservatives and Republicans were used to never getting black men's votes anyway. So we have absolutely no sway with convincing and conditioning them to do anything outside of working and aligning with other men who see common issues as well. On the flip side, they know on the left, they recognize that there's some of the policies that they're pushing, especially with the border and everything that they're doing, they know that they're under a clock with this community. So my view is like, I think that if we hone in on the economic components, learn some trades, work together, do what we can on the individual networking level, and then coalesce and work together with those that are like-minded, regardless of where they come from, just to get a few wins, we may then be at the other end of it, which is like when Kamala Harris gave her book, right? When Kamala Harris just gave her book, who did she blame and identify specifically for why she felt like she lost? Two guys in the red pill space, podcasters, content creators. So what I'm suggesting is what you said about we may not see it 30, 40 in our lifetime. We also saw in real time guys that nobody knew about 6 to 8 years ago heavily impacted, according to one of the two people that ran. She said herself, she identified them by name in the very movement that we're doing in this manosphere content creation space. She's identifying them by name as to why she felt like she lost her election.
Yes, who did she mention?
Myron Gaines and Andrew Tate.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, she in her book, she mentioned them by name, by quote. So what I'm suggesting is, and how do I know that maybe we're in the mix of being able to kind of sway and have more control over this than we realize? If the leading Democrat presidential candidate is naming them by name in her book, if while they were running last year, her and Trump, she avoids all the political podcasts, all the big podcasts where she would have been challenged, and Trump went to all of them, and he won and she didn't, and he went to all the male-dominated ones, Joe Rogan or whichever, he's going to all of them, and she basically didn't. She went to Oprah and a couple, ones that she knew was.
I mean, she played to different demographic. I think that was her mistake.
What I'm arguing is maybe what we're seeing and sensing over the last year or so, where everybody's talking about the gender war and there's a political divide between men and women and everything. Maybe we're in the midst of that right now. And like you said, I don't know what it's going to be 4 years from now. I do know that something's going on. That I do know.
But this is the thing. I'm not offended by that perspective at all. Right? In many ways, because this is what's interesting to me, right? It's possible, and I when I was laughing when you were speaking, I was kind of giggling to myself because I was like that. I teach Booker T. Washington's work in my intellectual history classes. That's very similar to what he was saying about how Black people not only utilize the vote or aspire for the ballot, but how they pursue their general interests. You understand that the society is against you, so you do the best decision, even if it degrades certain elements, of your group to get the outcome, which for him was, of course, money to fund his institutions. I think you're right. Black men should look at their ballot as transactional. I think, you know what, I have a degree in political science, and one of the first things back in the 90s they used to say
Hmm.
is you have party voters and you have issue-based voters. And what happens in black people is we never seem to take seriously issues.
Mm,
We fight each other and condemn each other over party ideology and allegiance, but we never talk about issues. And I agree. I think black men's votes especially should be transactional.
hmm.
What are we getting for our vote? Because it's very valuable. And what we've done right now is we've conflated two terms. We've conflated progressive and just minded with voting for Democrats, and
Hmm.
then being
True.
misogynist and evil with voting for Republicans.
Fair.
And that's the kind of binary thinking. I think that under Trump, it becomes pretty obvious
Hmm.
which
Hmm.
side creates the most harm and political evil, right?
Hmm.
But I don't
Hmm.
think that's necessarily a moral justification. What black people have to understand is this: black men have been disadvantaged under liberal democratic policies in
Yeah.
employment, education, even denying the very notion of black male privilege operates in the academy and within industry as a way to deny black men the benefits of affirmative action, because
Hmm.
it says that you should be less preferred than a female candidate, or even in many cases even a white female candidate, right? That black, and that's what's crazy to me.
Hmm. Hmm.
But we won't get out of that unless we make our votes, or the little power we have, unless we tie it to some outcome that our group desires or that benefits our group. No
Hmm.
argument there.
Yeah. Yeah.
What we have to do, however, right, and this is what I think that we constantly miss the boat on,
Okay.
is we have to start educating our communities about the issues and necessities and the outcomes that specifically benefit black men. Black men do not have to agree with black women politically to be considered just minded and fair.
Yeah.
And what's happened under the liberal democratic culture is that if black men deviate from the Democratic Party's darling, right,
Hmm.
we say that those black men are pathological or they're misogynist, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's only so long that a population can do the same thing and get the same negative outcomes.
Yeah.
And what I saw under Trump, because I was here in the UK, what I saw under Trump, or during this election, is Kamala Harris saying that she's not very different from Biden in a world where Biden was leaked saying that he's done all he's going to do for black people. And then us blaming black men for voting for Trump and wanting to be patriarchs, right? Because this is what's being
Hmm.
filtered to the academy. Black men
Hmm.
are voting for Trump because they want to be patriarchs and dominate women. And then the election results coming out and saying that between 82 to 89% or 87% of black men voted for Kamala.
Mm.
So the idea here is that black men became this depository, even in our own communities, even against the facts of the reason that Kamala lost, right?
Hmm.
And we don't do, as you said, we don't do any of that for any of these other groups. You see, we are politically miseducated about what we think is better for black people. The Democrats have told us what's better for black people is what's the best for black women,
Hmm.
right? Black
Hmm.
men, they're collateral damage. But if
Hmm.
black women are being educated, if black women are being employed, if black women have faith in the Democratic Party, that's good enough for the race. All we have to do is tell black men that we're going to decrease weed sentences and give them access to women, or sexual access to women, and we'll
Yeah.
get their ballot.
Yep.
You see what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
absolutely deserves to be that's trash. I'm here when I see that stuff. So I'm kind of, my only medium to filter this through like Facebook, where I
Yep.
say, is this real?
Yeah.
But we
It's
have
real.
to be clear. Black men fighting for their own interests, even when it disagrees from black women, has to be repositioned and re-socialized. We have to understand the meaning and significance of that, right? We can't continue to say that black men's political futures are to be kept the keepsake of black women's political aspirations.
Hmm.
There are some issues that black men and women will agree on that I think we have to negotiate within ourselves as the betterment for the race and the community. And
Yep.
there are other things where black men and women are not going to agree on. But
Yep.
we can't continue to allow black men to be depicted in these pundit shows, be talked about in the View on the View. I remember Sonny going off, these crazy, stupid, pathetic black men who vote. You're again not asking the question of why. You're
Yeah.
not asking about the failures of the liberal democratic ideology and party as to why black men are thinking that even under a racist, their future may be better safeguarded. I
Yeah.
disagree with that position. I fundamentally disagree with everything Trump does. I disagree with Hillary and Kamala.
Yeah.
But I understand why there are certain groups of black men who are
Hmm.
in a different class, different position, maybe a victim of her carceral logics that were locked up when she was governor, right? That may have a completely different view. And
Yeah.
we have to understand that the black community, especially black men, are not a monolith. You cannot hold black men,
Hmm.
right? You can't shackle them to your political aspirations and you can't make it so that black men are bad people because they didn't vote for the best outcome for black women against their own interests.
Hmm.
And that's what I'll tell you personally. That is what traffics in throughout U.S. academies. That's what travels
Hmm.
throughout liberal arts departments. That black
Hmm.
men should only be liberal, right?
Yeah.
I won't say they should support Trump. They should. You may get black conservatives. That's an option in a where you
Yeah.
have Democrats and conservatives, but we don't allow for that difference in diversity. And the
At all.
problem is that many of the black conservatives that are gaining attention now are doing so off of the back of Trump talking points instead of saying that they have a specific program of black conservatism that benefits black people or address their problems. And that's what I
Hmm.
meant when I said
Hmm.
political ideology and appealing to the white group in power is just as destructive as
Hmm.
our complicity in accepting white democratic liberal policies and ideology that have been nothing but detrimental to our community.
I appreciate. Listen, Doc, I appreciate this. I've kept you way longer than I thought I was going to keep you.
No,
I
it's
know
not
we're
a
going to do
problem.
this again. It sounds
Absolutely.
like having gone through this entire year, talking with brilliant minds like yourself, Dr. Tia San, and so many others, from Dave Anderson to many other people.
Hmm.
Uh, Re-education and updating our philosophy in terms of our identity, how we're going to move politically, even economically. It sounds like 2026. We need to very quickly talk behind the scenes and come up with something that we can offer to as many people who are thinking like this and wanting to think of something different, and open it up maybe to Democrats, Republicans, Independents, anybody and everybody,
Yeah.
and as a collective. And it doesn't matter if it's here domestically or where you are. It sounds like that's the very next step. And when we do that, we get on the same page, understand where we're going to be in agreement, where we're going to disagree, what we're going to advocate for politically, and what we're going to do economically, and what's our 5 year, 10 year, and beyond plans.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
Um,
we have to, yeah, and I would, the one thing I would add to that is that we have to start doing a better job looking at the mental health and well-being of young black men and boys. Right?
100%.
We don't take the violence and trauma that black men hold on to from their traumatic experiences in childhood and make that a viable conversation
Mm,
in terms of our interests. And I think that has to happen. But no, you're
I
absolutely
agree.
right, man.
I
we
agree.
we, we can't be afraid of ideas. And I think, and again, I just want to commend you. I mean, even where we have points of disagreement,
Mhm.
I understand the necessity of pushing the cart forward in bringing some of these ideas and notions up for questioning. So
Yeah.
I think my hat's off to you in that because I appreciate that approach.
I appreciate. Listen, I'm honored that you and everyone's kind of come to the platform and engaged in this stuff, and it's cool because, like you said, I don't got a doctorate. I'm not even an author yet, and it's cool to get to have these conversations. But I also know that people will look at this 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now and saying, "Are we still talking about the same thing?" That's what
Yeah,
everybody's
and I
going.
think, yeah,
That's what they're gonna say.
I
That's what
get
they're gonna
that.
say to me, right? And I
Yeah.
know that for me, I don't wanna rush into, "We need to do this, or we need to link up with this." I actually appreciate a lot of your critiques about being mindful that that same energy I have for the liberals and the, so-called progressives, and, the far, and those who are pushing policies that I think are harming us. I already assume that as a given on the other end for many
Mhm.
of their policies as well. But in linking with them, what potential harm can come, even if we get wins in one area, what's going to be the
Mhm.
cost in the other area? Like, these are things I had to think about that you kind of put out there. So now I'm like, yeah, this is true. It's so much of what you're talking about, where it's like I think between you guys, the current contemporaries, Stokely Carmichael's, the Booker T's of the world. I think
Mhm.
that that even Ice Cube stuff. I think that there's so
Yeah,
many
yeah.
brilliant ideas that, including the Black Panthers and what they did and attempted to do. I think that we probably need a multi-tiered approach that
Mhm.
that is not limited to the U.S. domestic land. I think
It
that's been
cannot
our
be limited to the US. Yes.
that's probably been our number one greatest issue, believe it or not,
Yeah.
is that
I agree with you. Yes.
thinking that we have to that when you've allowed those who hate you to decide what's the rules and boundaries of where you can fight, you already are in the losing position.
Man,
So
listen.
I'm realizing now you don't get to dictate as me as a black man who I can vote for, how I can think,
Mhm.
what I can bring up, how I can move, where I can live, and who I can build coalitions with. And that's me and us stepping outside of the matrix. But the difference is you guys have been doing this longer than me. I want to take you and all of the people who have the most brilliant minds ever, bring them in with the political strategists, bring them in with the business minded people, and say, we need a plan so that by the time we invite these people from everywhere around the planet, what's the seminar going to look like? And what's
Yeah.
the course of action so that when we go back home to our communities, we'll have a pamphlet, we'll have a guide, we'll know it strategically. And when we start going, all they got to do is follow to the T and recognize that there's going to be a massive amount of energy coming out of that meeting. So I'm excited. I think that this is something we can actually do next year, and it'll probably be number one or number two on my priority list once
Oh, that's
you
fantastic.
yeah, so once you and Dr. Hassan and everybody start talking about this, and we, we put our thoughts together, I think this is something we could actually legitimately make happen. But
No,
listen,
I agree with you.
um, thank you for coming on. Why don't you tell
It's been a
folks?
pleasure, sir. It's been an
I
absolute pleasure.
appreciate you genuinely. Why don't you let everybody know where they can, support you, and as far as your projects and also your books and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so the man not, is coming up on 9 years. I'm almost finished with the sequel to it. You can certainly purchase it. My articles I try to make available for Black people. You can check that out on ResearchGate. I'm on Twitter at Dr. TJC. A lot of the work I do, and I really again want to thank you for the opportunity to come to your platform. A lot of the work that I do is really trying to re-socialize Black communities. So I really do value and treasure the opportunity to be able to speak to Black people, even though I'm all the way here in Scotland. So yeah, people can Google me, they can email me, they'll find my email address at Edinburgh here. And again, I thank people and I thank you, sir, for letting us actually discuss Black male studies as a way to kind of launch off some of these conversations.
Thank you so much. So, sir, we'll be in contact soon. I'm gonna finish out these chats and close out the show. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Y'all, we did it again. We had an incredible, almost 2.5 hour interview. This was fire. This was amazing. He gave me so much to think about. I'm definitely going to rewatch this myself probably tonight because I'm a nerd with this type of stuff. But I'm gonna tell y'all, man, I've been honored, and just knowing that I wasn't crazy growing up and thinking about all these things and having these type of questions, and everybody who thought and had these type of questions were people that were writing books, were professors, and were kind of so far away to where I couldn't connect with anybody who had these type of questions, who was wondering what's happened to men and masculinity and black men and my community. And when you try to talk to people about maybe we got to do something different, it just would never go anywhere. It would never go anywhere. You get demonized, you get attacked, you'd be called a coon and a sellout and everything. And starting this channel actually hasn't been very easy. Personally, uh, it's been strange to see the amount of people who's galvanized and come together and recognizing that we need to make some major structural changes on a variety of levels in terms of men and women, the racial issue, a cultural issue, the general societal issue. And it's a big, daunting task when we're up against corrupt governments around the world that have created illusions of choice to give people the impression that they're trying to fix problems that they created. So it was an honor to have Dr. Curry on, and I best believe y'all, I'm going to keep in contact with him and Dr. Hassan and Dave Anderson and many of the other guests and people who I look up to and admire and go through their stuff thoroughly and see if maybe we can come up with some type of plan because in real time and actually by the next major election, we have a very unified approach that a lot of our men and a lot of our women and potentially people who are outside of the foundational Black American community could buy into because it's something that we can tap into things that's very specific and unique for us. Maybe some things we got to handle on our own, but also some general things that I think most people would be open to jumping in, buying into. So listen, y'all, I hope that y'all enjoyed this. Thank y'all for tuning in. I hope that y'all loved it. Best believe, y'all, more and more is to come for sure. This definitely motivates me to want to go back to school. My wife would kill me to probably try to get my doctor. I may bother Dr. Curry to see if there's a program or something I can apply for over there for virtually. We'll see what happens with that. But I love scholarship. I love talking with people that thinks. As you saw, we didn't just talk about the issues. We also talked about potential solutions. And clearly we have that energy where it sounds like, come 2026, we're going to have much more in place. And again, this is an open door policy, y'all. So this is not about just shitting on Democrats for the sake of shitting on them. I'm shitting on those at the top that run the party. I acknowledge that. But this is way more about taking as many like-minded, common sense people from all over the country and all over the world and recognizing that maybe we have much more power and influence over our lives in an individual level and a collective level as well. And I think these type of conversations gets us to just be aware of what's happening. Women that are watching this is like, oh my God, I didn't realize I was thinking this way, treating my sons or the men in my life this way. Men recognizing, oh wow, I need to stop moving in a certain way, believing certain things, and recognize that there is unique challenges that comes with being a Black man or a man, period. And it's time for me to start advocating and working with like-minded people that are trying to actually address those issues. So listen, y'all, I appreciate the support. I hope that this was a dope interview for you all. So guys, make sure that you like it. Make sure that you subscribe. Make sure that you become a member if you have it for $2.99. Feel free to hit that super chat if you see fit. And I'm gonna tell y'all, it was an honor. It was another honor for me to have another incredible, brilliant mind on this set. So listen, y'all, stay tuned and best believe this probably will not be the last time you hear from Dr. Curry and from me and many of the other people, because I've been very intentional with the people I've asked into this space. And, and it's good that somebody that I can respect can also point out things that I need to sharpen up on, read more on, and be ready, because in 2026, I hope that the impact that I have, even up to this point, pales in comparison to what it's going to be 2026 and beyond. And it's not just for me to get the clout, but because I actually want to see a difference in my life and the life of people that I care about, as Americans, as Black Americans, et cetera. So, I think these types of conversations in a world that's dominated by trashy topics and always debating on panels about who's always at fault for everything and who's ratchet and who's this or who's that. I hope that this is something you all like enjoy and would want to watch. So listen, y'all, your boy's tired. I'm gonna get something to eat. It's going on almost 11 o'clock here at my time, Eastern Standard Time for sure. I will be reading through all the questions later tonight, just skimming through. So listen, y'all, this is probably 400 or 500 comments in here. So I cannot get through them all in terms of this live chat because we're already at 2.5 hours. But listen, y'all, I appreciate y'all. Thank y'all for supporting and engaging in this stuff. It's been a dream of mine and it's happening. So I'm excited. I think, when and again, I'll be reaching out to Obsidian, and I think that we're going to be bringing in the Manosphere Conclave, a lot of different groups. I think this is something where we can kind of bring it all home and do a major meetup. And when those people that are in the room that are professors, are doctors, are lawyers, are judges, are politicians, you name it, when that invite happens, it'll probably be closed door. It probably will not be recorded, and it'll be a plan. And we're going to do the plan. We're going to do the plan. We're not just going to talk about it, and we're going to be about it. And whichever political party decides they want to honor and work with us to give us even 20% of what we asked for while we work on focusing on building up the rest, hey, that's more than what I think most of us can expect or ask for in modern America. So listen, y'all, have a good evening. Please, 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 if you've done nothing else, please hype this video and send it to 2 or 3 people if you can. Let's blow this video up and get it up to the stratosphere, especially when it comes to really deep, meaningful conversations like this. I got some surprise guests coming up next week. So stay tuned for that. Some really big guests, actually, maybe 2 or even potentially 3 are going to be coming up. So it just depends on how the schedule shakes out. So listen, y'all, tomorrow, make sure you tune in for my live. It's going to be next up is going to be Single by Choice is a Lie. And then the last episode for this week is going to be The Truth About Black Fatigue, where I give my honest views and opinions on why this term's been out there, why it's been used, and what's the pros and cons of normalizing that type of language when describing foundational Black Americans and their community and culture. So listen, y'all, have a good night, and I'm gonna talk to y'all soon. And and one more and appreciate you, Blood Crow 1698 for the super chats. Listen, y'all killed it with the super chats for sure. Y'all making it very clear that y'all love the interviews more than anything else. So I'm gonna try to keep doing both for sure. I just don't want to go too crazy because it's a lot of work with trying to prep and read people's stuff and be able to have a really meaningful, engaged interview with them because I have to watch their videos, read some of their things, read their articles. So there's much more work that I'm doing. And listen, remember, y'all, your boy got a 9 to 5. I got an hour commute each way. I got a 1-year-old. So your boy is balancing all this stuff until hopefully one day I get to pick and just choose this path going forward. So listen, y'all, have a good night. Just know that the plan is coming. And when the plan comes and we announce it, all we got to do is stick to it and we'll see what happens and unfolds. So listen, y'all, have a good evening, and I will see y'all that want to tune in tomorrow night. Talk to y'all soon. Peace.